to switch. So if there's something like to acknowledge, like you're doing something really great that should be talked about, of course. I mean, listen, acknowledging your greatness doesn't do anything to me. Doesn't make me less. Doesn't make you. It's just. I mean, you're just great. If you're great, you are great. But if you don't have that kind of thing, nobody me go call a lie say you get them, because that would be unfair. I'm a child of God. I'm a child of God. I don't like to lie. It's not good. It's not good to lie. All liars shall go to hell. Aku abikilo ko ti na. You know the meaning of your name in Yoruba? Go down. Where were we? Guys, let me just reset YouTube. Please, if you're on YouTube, please check if it's working now. Two but why saying I think it's working. What's this topic, Zef? Okay, I will. Why are you people laughing? When I speak Ibadan dialect, it actually makes me feel very Maconroti. Meanwhile, it's not like I go out, I used to go out when I was kid though. But we're not getting inside, shall we? Because this is getting inside. Bye. Okay. Oh, when I say Lord Mojaku, what is very cosmos? Àbí ọlọ́mọjàkú ọlọ́mọsọ̀rọ̀ wà lọ́rọ̀ ọ̀rọ̀ àìdá. All right, I think we're good. We're good. YouTube is good. Now I found what I'm supposed to be doing. Anytime we have this kind of thing, I'll be engaging our. What's the update on Ghana's Nigeria must go? Something more important has happened in Ghana, Gonself. There's I mean they've talked about it, Sha. Let me just put it that way. And the guy has also said Olóhùn Shemo Eruba, I guess. He's not planning to build that space again. So he has already changed, I think they've already sorted it. To be honest, Ghanaians don't have a problem with Nigerians. They have a problem with a particular group. I saw something was it yesterday, right? It was yesterday. I was shocked. The person said it was Yoruba people instigating Ghanaians against them. Is it that responsibility is kryptonite in some quarters? You can't just take responsibility. You messed up, just take it. And then, of course, there are bigger fish to fry now in Ghana. The one that could have killed the president, thank God he was not on board. And even then, my heart goes out to the families of those who died. A lot of people lost loved ones in that helicopter crash. So there's a lot of... but of course, they already sorted that out. Even, what's this woman's name? Bianca Ojukwu. She was in Ghana now. And this matter carry and go Ghana now. She went to Ghana. They spoke about that and things like that. So, you two people, I apologize. Whoever be know, I don't know why this thing keeps crashing, but 1 second. If you're on YouTube, 1 second. I want to check. Go back to Ghana now. All right. So let me set up the folks on Twitter and then we can get started. Yeah, I was saying that. So a lot of things have happened since then, and people are just focusing on that one. But before then, Bianca Ojukwu was in Ghana, and they had a conversation about it, and they were able to, you know, reach a consensus, I should say. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Or is it evening? It's past 5. No, it's almost 6 actually. It's 22 minutes to 6. So good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for being here. They are saying we sponsored it. We already spoke about that. The protest on archaeology in Ife is unnecessary. It's actually very, very, very unnecessary. That's not a protest. That's extremism. But we talked about that already. Um, we're going to move to today's topic. Finally, uh, God. We don't finish YouTube now at Twitter. Oh boy, this thing is work. Oh. Ah. Mumbo, Ejo. Okay. I think Twitter is good now. All right. So the news was long today, but we're still getting some things. If you're on TikTok, please power tap. Thank you very much for getting us to 200. Wow. Let me clap for everybody. Let's clap. Let's clap. Hope you can hear it on Twitter, but no much about. Thank you very much for liking the live, and thank you for making this work. But please don't stop. If you're on YouTube, this is our third try, and like we're long when it close because I had to change device and switch Twitter. Now we are starting all over again on Twitter because of you YouTube people. But it is well. We're glad you're here. Thank you for being here. So please like the live, share the live, and we're going to get deep into this topic today. I hope I tried with my parable, J-Links, because I saw you writing parable. Shame will try. All right, so we've been talking about Awolowo. Nnamdi Kanu has brainwashed AMU to believe that Igbos are Israelites. So who is brainwashing them to believe that they are from Ife? By the way, if one day maybe I'll do a session, but I'm trying not to do the session because I don't want to make it look as if I'm trying to tell them their story. But the truth of the matter is that there's a reason they're always going from one end to another, looking for their origin, right? So for Yoruba people there is the common collective idea of origin that we all have, Ife. And we've had it for a long time, for more than thousands of years. We've had that, okay, we are from Ife. Device is a problem. So YouTube was not the one that has problem, because now even Twitter is going off on it. This device is the problem. One is Shorota and Wawa. I can't switch to this one. You know what? Let's just go on. Twitter people, please join us. You will hear me wherever you are. I was saying this, that, sorry, what was I saying? Your diplomacy is highly commendable. We're trying. Thank you for your kind words. I don't think these people actually understand how much I'm stopping myself from saying, because if they knew, they would they would they would they will be better, they will do better. But they don't get it. Ṣé àwọn kan àwọn ọmọ lẹ́lẹ́ ìdá fún sórí ẹni ọmọ bọ́ sí lẹ́lẹ́. But we'll do what we can. I was saying something like that. Identity crisis. Thank you. Thank you for reminding me. You see, the thing is this. If, and again, I don't like comparing, but I think it's important because people compare. So let's use this opportunity. Your people have a collective understanding that they have an origin and the place is different. Whether it's based on myth, on ancestry, on history, they agree, right? Science comes later and then asks them the question and tries to prove that. And then science asks, is there somewhere else before this place that maybe as a group you don't necessarily talk about but exists? Is there something like that? So they're like, be like, say something like that exists. So what did they do? They use archaeology and they arrived there and we have the data. So for Yoruba, for instance, there's a mythical origin, there's a historical origin, scientific origin, everything is proven that can be shared easily and freely. And let me also add this, for those who say I'm doing something on social media, confusing people from a particular ethnic group, what you don't understand is the fact that, and there's a reason I'm always quoting books. Again, I'm trained, I'm a minister. So the thing about ministers is that you have to say scripture to give credence or to establish what you're trying to pass across, so that you're not speaking on your own authority. Why? Because I was not there. I can't be telling you about the war and be saying. That's why when I watch videos online and people just say the story, me, I was like, you guys are bold though. And it's not like, because sometimes they say the most ridiculous things, but they say with boldness. I'm like, Eliao. Somebody sent me, they sent me things like this on a day. I saw one yesterday. No, two ladies. They were saying it. They were talking. I'm like, is this history or poem? Like, they were just saying it like they were there. Meanwhile, what they were saying is not correct. And it's not correct because the reason I can say it's not correct is not because I was there, because I was not there either. But I can say it's not correct because I had to ask the people who were there and listen to them. And when you put it together, it's different from what they are saying. It's what my father tell me, my mother tell me, my people tell me. I'm wondering, how are you able to do this with so much confidence? I can't do it, right? I can't do it because if you ever ask me where I got it from, I should be able to say here, here, here. I can't just sit and just make things up. Do I have my own theories? Yes. Have I made up my own theories on many of these matters? Yes. But those theories did not just fall from the sky. You have to. So let me say it this way. There's certain inferences you're going to draw as a researcher that the books that you have consulted did not mention. But the point is, you have to be able to trace your journey to that inference. In other words, you did not just arrive here. You didn't just arrive here. Like, you took a trip. You were here. You got down at this junction. You got into this bus, and then you got into a Uber, got into a plane. You have to explain how you arrived. And I don't know if people think that is important, but I think it's important. And I think that's also what makes it different from Rousseau. Having said that, we're going to move away from all these things. I'm trying not to dwell on that. We'll talk about it another time. We've been talking about Awolowo, right? And I've said, in our opinion, is the most important personality in Nigerian political history, right? Especially when you're talking about federalism, right? The idea of how to structure a multi-ethnic nation like Nigeria, the person who actually, it wasn't the only one. Zik also talked about it, but the reason I cannot follow Zik on that matter is because Zik was not stable. Zik was for federalism today, then he wanted a unitary system tomorrow. The day after, when they said we want to have more states, and then when the minorities wanted it, he said no, it wasn't stable, and you know, I don't think it's good for me to follow, that particular example, because then you're wondering, if it was so good, why did you change? And if it was so bad, why did you return to it? So the one who was consistent on the matter was Papa, that's Chief Obafemi Awolowo. And again, if you're joining us for the first time, if you ever hear me say Papa here, most likely, unless I'm talking about movies, when I'm talking about movies, I'll say Baba, and I'll be talking about Hubert Ogunde. But if I'm talking about politics and you hear me say Papa, I'm talking about um, Chief Obafemi Awolowo. Olotu, were you here? Were we here yesterday? Yes, we were here. We were here 1 p.m., but we ended earlier than usual. All right. So we've talked a lot about many things. Again, we're reading the book Arwood, the autobiography of Chief Obafemi Awolowo, and it's our primary source. And the reason, of course, is because, he's talking about himself, his own evolution and everything. However, in talking about himself, he also had to mention other people. For instance, he mentioned his parents, he mentioned his siblings. But he also talked about his journey. He talked about his education, his career, um, his journey through life, and now, of course, his politics. Now, the thing is this: if he's talking about his politics, he will also mention certain people that were in politics together at the same time. And one of those people that he has mentioned is Zik, or was Zik. Now, one of the reasons I'm very, very bored with this particular book and using it as a source material is about Zik is because it was written when Zik was alive. Not only was he alive, he was the Senate president that same year, 1960. And that's it. By the way, Zik was our first Senate president. He was Senate president in January of 1960, and then he became Governor General October. So he was there when the book was published. This book was published in 1960. And Zik was alive for 36 more years. Now, there are other books that I can also bring up, on this particular matter. But the reason I stay with one particular one is because it's the source material for many other books. So I was like, why bother, going from stuff to stuff when we have a lot here that we can work with? So that's why we're sticking to this book. And what we've learned we've learned a lot so far. We've learned about his early life. We've learned about his schooling. We've also learned about how he went there. No, we've not really gone to how he got to the UK, but we've talked about how the process of getting to the UK, and also how they started the NYM, the Nigerian Youth Movement, which we spent a lot of time talking about in previous sessions. Last time, we started talking about federalism and the views of Awo and also of Zik. But for Zik, not so much his views, to be honest, because it's more like his antagonism towards Awo's view. Right? Sorry, as I'm doing this, I'm the engineer. A day is coming when there'll be many engineers doing these things, and I'll just focus on content. But we are here right now, so let's work with what we have. I hope this thing doesn't go off again. It has gone off like 4 times, and it's distracting. Umbo. I don't know what's happening to this. You know what? Twitter people, I beg. Maybe it is not working right now. Join us, but I think it's working. But if you have any issues, we'll be here. All right. So we spoke about NYM and how the group was formed. Some videos are coming out, today to go deeper into how Azikiwe introduced tribalism into Nigerian politics. Oftentimes you hear people say things like, well, Awolowo did this. And all the people that say it, of course, are from the East. You also have it in the book by Mbadiwe, that's Ozumba Mbadiwe. The book is titled The Rebirth of a Nation. And in that book, he also did the same thing, castigating Awo. Interestingly, Mbadiwe, who said that, and one day I'm going to have a session on that man alone. Mbadiwe, who said all these things, was also the one who wrote the document from the Igbo State Union that essentially described the plan that they had in subjugating other ethnic groups in Nigeria. We're going to read it maybe today, or at this rate, it'd be like I'm going to have a full session tomorrow, because I spent too much time on the news. But let's just see how far we can go today. Anyway, somebody who was saying how was the tribalist started tribalism was the one who was a signatory. There were two, by the way. It wasn't Badiwe and Banugo. He was one of those whose signature appear on the document that essentially described how they were planning to do all kinds of things to, and even the things that they had done to different ethnic groups in Nigeria. But they are the ones who call you tribalists. And to also make it very clear that there was no tribalism in Nigeria until Azikiwe came on board. Now, we mentioned NYM. I'm not going to go through it, but the video is going to be out later, so later in the evening, I think, or latest by tomorrow morning, you should be able to access it. But one is actually going on right now, so by the time we're done, you'll be able to see it. All right. So when you look at the old movement, NYM, now NYM is very, very, very important in Nigeria's history because it's the first nationalist organization in Nigeria. NYM was founded, in Lagos in 1934. It was called Lagos Youth Movement. We talked about it several times. It was founded because of what was happening with Yaba Higher College at the time, which is now called Yaba Tech. Again, Yaba Tech is an old school. It's a school that was even founded before University of Ibadan, which was founded in 1948. We talked about the different things that happened with Nigerian Youth Movement and the fight they had. We also mentioned that by 1937 they were trying to get political seats in Lagos Legislative Council and the Lagos Town Council. And there were 3 seats in Legislative Council in Lagos at the time, but they were able to win. And they were able to win those 3. But for the Lagos Town Council, they won every seat but one. And we said that one of the people who was very instrumental to the success of the NYM in 1938 was Zik. And it's important to mention that because a lot of times when people hear us say things about what certain people did, it makes it look as if we're trying to demonize them. But of course, it's also important to acknowledge their greatness. So for instance, Zik was a fantastic orator, was a great writer, he was very influential. He was the publisher of the happening paper at the time, West African Pilot. Before Zik returned to Nigeria in 1937, by the way, he had come to Nigeria in 1934, then he went to Ghana, then he returned in 1937. When he returned, by the time he returned in 1937, there were already 3 major papers in Lagos. There was Nigerian Daily Times, there was Nigerian Daily Telegraph, and there was Lagos Daily News. But what Zik did revolutionize newspaper industry at the time, the media industry in Lagos at the time, because it was hip, it was more antagonistic towards the British, it was more audacious. And those things helped, in getting him liked by the people. When we say the people, we mean the people living in Lagos State, Nigerians of different ethnicities and creed. Everybody liked it, or at least liked this paper. And a lot of people even left, civil service to work in West African Pilot. So it was very, very influential, and he used his papers, and he also used his oratory gift to get people to, vote for NYM. So it was very instrumental in the success of NYM. That was in 37. But everything started changing in 38, and we talked about the things that happened in 38, for instance, how Zik started, doing things against the movement, against the party. 1 second, please. We have to switch our source. Sure, today? Sorry. Just a little housekeeping. I think we're good now. But so we don't have another break in another 5 minutes. Let me just do it now. Let me change the audio source as well. I should change light source and let's change audio source. It will be very fast, I promise. You know what? Bilal says it's going to take a while. Let me just keep talking. And then I will switch. When it's time to switch, I'll let you know. All right, where were we? So we talked about how Zik helped to, was instrumental in ensuring the success of the NYM in 37 and 38. But here's what changed. 38, there were personal issues that, according to him, which it eventually said in 1940, he had with certain people. E.g., we talked about how a particular person known as Mr. Bates, who was the editor of Nigerian Daily Times, had issues with him because they were rivals. And by the way, so at the time, think about it for a second. At the time, there was Nigerian Daily Times, Nigerian Daily Telegraph, and then there was Lagos Daily News, and then there was West African Pilot. Lagos Daily News was led by Herbert Macaulay, so you couldn't come close. He was a father of nationalism. Nigerian Daily Telegraph was headed by Ernest Ekoli, who was also a member of NYM, so no wala there. But Nigerian Daily Times was headed by Bates, who had nothing to do with NYM. And so he was competing actively with Zik, who was the editor of West African Pilot. And in their rivalry, any small thing could cause wahala. And one of those things that caused wahala was the visit of H.O. Davis, who was the chieftain of the NYM. His visit to Bates became an issue for Zik. At this point, let me just quickly change the audio source. Give me a second, please. All right, thank you very much. So there was an issue, for instance, during the election when Bates was saying, "Oh, nobody's going to vote for another candidate called Samuel Akesanya, who was a member of the NYM." And it was all about it, like, "Oh, I have a flood of letters and stuff like that." And H.O. Davis had gone there to ask for him to show him what flood of letters he was talking about. But that visit became a problem because Bates talked about it, and Zik took umbrage and started insulting everybody. We talked about the football match that happened, and this was in 1940, and how Zik turned it all around to become a major thing. But before that happened, let me quickly say this. Zik started West African Pilots in 1937, and everything was good for a while. But in 38, he decided to show tribalism. So up until then, everybody thought of Nigeria as a whole, right? Like, we are nationalists, we are Nigerians. Sometimes they even say we are Africans. They rarely said, "Oh, Yoruba," especially in those circles. They will not talk so much about their ethnicities or their tribal differences. They were more about Nigeria, Nigeria, Nigeria. However, when Zik came around, he began to insert heavy dosage of tribalism in Nigerian political discourse. So whereas people would say things like a Nigerian has traveled or a Nigerian has returned from the UK or something like that, Zik would say an Igbo man. He was the first person who dared to do that kind of thing. An Igbo man did this, an Igbo man did that. So that happened in 38, 39, 40, 41. He just kept doing it. And people started noticing that, wait, it'd be like, say, this person has a different idea. So in 1940, everything came to a head. And one of the things that triggered that was actually his reportage of the event that happened in Lagos. So there was a football match between the CKC team. Between CKC is Christ the King's College of Onitsha. They played a football match with St. Gregory, that's Greg's in Lagos, and they won the match 5-4. But Zik used the opportunity to talk about the superiority of the Igbos over other people. He talked about the fact that they had an exceptionally developed brain. He talked about the fact that they invaded the islands. He talked about the fact that, nobody could, explain how they did it but the gods. All kind of crazy things that he said. And it made people, no, there was no action group. No action group until 1951. Stay with me, please. At this point, there was no action group. We're talking 1930s, 1940s, okay? And this is what I'm saying right now is happened in 1940. So it made it look as if, oh, these guys are better than everybody. And, so people started noticing that there's something is up about this guy. And then by September of 1940, they decided to have a meeting where they were going to either discipline him, but the idea really was for him to explain to them why he should still remain a member of the NYM. So in October of 1940, he comes along, and they decide to placate him and say, "Oh, why did you do? Why have you been involved in anti-party activities? Why have you been attacking our own party members? Meanwhile, you're also a member of the party." And while they were doing all of these things, he got angry and said he was going to resign. But then they begged him not to resign. And of course, Awolowo got very angry with that whole thing. Why? Because everybody knew that in the last 2-3 years, Zik had been doing crazy things that affected the success of the party and the harmony within the comrades. Eventually, they told him, "Nah, don't resign." And the reason they did that was, like I said, because there's going to be an election, a couple of months after that particular meeting, and they wanted to win, knowing that Zik was a publisher and was very loved and influential. It made sense to pander towards him. So they pandered towards him, but it didn't really help so much, because by February of 1941, Zik did two things. Number one, he resigned from the party. Number two, he now brought tribalism beyond just saying Igbo did this, Igbo did that, to using it amongst the NYM itself to now say certain things happen because of tribalism. So what Zik did was to inject something and said that was the reason, but it was his own idea. And in case you were not here, I'll quickly mention it. Egnola, good to see you. I'll quickly mention what actually happened for the umpteenth time, but I don't mind. So this is what happened. One of the members representing NYM in the Legislative Council, his name was Kofu Abayomi. He had to go to, please, if you're on TikTok, please power tap. We're seeing inactivity. I really need your help. We've done so well, but we've got to make sure we don't lose the live. So please, and if you're on YouTube, power tap just means that you have to repeatedly tap on the screen. Apparently, we have to do that if we want to do well on TikTok. And we're streaming from TikTok, by the way. But I'm glad you're here, everyone. All right, where was I? So, Kofu Abayomi was representing NYM in the Lagos Legislative Council, but he had to go to the UK for a special course in ophthalmology. While away, the seat was vacant, so they're going to have an election to fill that as a by-election. And the issue with that is that while the leader of the movement at the time was Ernest Ekoli, he was an Ijaw man, and he indicated interest in that seat. According to the policy of NYM, if the president indicated interest, nobody would, it would be, what's the word they used to use? Unopposed. Nobody would oppose him. But in this case, they made a mistake. They decided to have a primary. And in that primary, another person who was the vice president at the time, Oba Samuel Akinsoya, he won. He was 108 votes, and Ernest Ekoli had 60 votes. But then they were still going to subject that to the ratification of the executive committee. The executive committee met and said, you know what, we're going to go back to the policy of the movement, saying that the president should run unopposed. So they said the president should run. That became a problem. While all this was going on, by the way, in the beginning, I was like, it's okay, they're going to work together. Much later, I changed his mind. But Zik did something that had never been done up until that time in Nigeria's political history. And what did he say? He said the reason the NYM did not want him to run was because he was Ijebu. Nobody had ever heard that kind of thing in Nigerian politics before that point. This was in 1941, February. So that was the work of Zik. So much for a nationalist and Pan-African, right? Anyway, he did that, and that led to that was the beginning of the end of the NYM. The Ijebu people took offense, and then eventually Akinsoya lost and Ernest Ekoli won. So the Ijebu and the Igbo people pulled out of NYM. Ijebu, because they told them that Akinsoya could not win because he was Ijebu. Never mind that the person who supported an Ijaw man was also Ijebu. That's Awolowo himself. Right? They're both Ijebu Remo. So Zik was able to use that to eventually destroy the party, which by 43, 44, it was essentially all they had was just carcass. All right. And then we moved on, of course, to the concept of federalism and what Awo said. And we read, the chapter called The Evolution of the Federalist. I'm just going to revisit that very quickly, and then we'll see how far we can go. But we're going to have a full session on this tomorrow. I know I talked about having this thing about the Civil War, but we're going to have it later. I think we had enough on that yesterday. So I promise to have another session tomorrow, but we're not going to stay as long, and maybe we'll not spend as much time on the news. But let's quickly do this. All right, so on board. Oh, I remember where we stopped. Fine. Beautiful. All right, so we talking about the whole thing about federalism. We talked about how was inspired greatly by Indian politicians. And this started in the 1920s. And I remember saying yesterday, on Wednesday, on Monday that your heroes had heroes. And if you ever meet anybody who has no heroes, it's not a person you should work with. Everybody looks up to someone. And by the way, having a hero does not mean you're talking about a perfect person, right? Nobody is perfect, not even your heroes. But you're not looking for perfection, you're looking for models, right? If you're looking for perfection, you have to die. When you see God, He's perfect in holiness. But if you're looking for role models, you find a lot of them. You want to see what they have done in that particular field. And in Nigerian politics, I think the only person of his generation, that I would vouch for would be Awo. But Awo himself had certain people that he looked up to, and he mentioned the names Mahatma Gandhi, Pandit Nehru, and Subha Bose. Those were the Indian nationalists or leaders that he was inspired by. I decided reading them in the Lagos Daily News in 1928. But by the early 1930s, somewhere around 1933, he already developed his mind. He was going to be a federalist. And so he talked about the fact that in the 20s, folks in India were trying to come up with a constitution. And one of the things they did was to come up with something that would recognize the linguistic divide. So he says here, one of the pronouncements of the Indian leaders which struck the right chord. I'll tell you that again. One of the pronouncements of the Indian leaders which struck the right chord in me was the one relating to the revision of provincial boundaries along linguistic lines in the reframing of the country's constitution. If this was done, it would mean that apart from the Indian parliament, each linguistic group would have its own legislature and government to deal with matters of peculiar interest to the group. Olawale on Twitter, thank you for joining us. And within the competence of a provincial government. So essentially, looking at it from a Nigerian perspective is like saying they're going to restructure Nigeria, and we have these conversations right now talking about restructuring. And everybody always says, let's go back to what Awo had. And I always say something about people who like the past more than the present. They don't really study that past. In truth, for the most part, we have nostalgia for a past that never existed. We talk about it with so much love and all of passion, but the truth is we don't really know what really happened. Because back in the day, even Awo had a problem with that structure. But we're going to get a very linguistic states, right? Yoruba states, Igbo states, Tiv states, Ibibio state. Why? Because what you have is that you are recognizing the different countries that are within the nation. And that's the natural lines that we had before Berlin Conference. And I will refer to that Berlin Conference here. In 1885, when the British arrived on our shores, what they did was they just, not even before it wasn't even about arriving on our shores. It was about having a conference in Berlin. They were not even in Africa. They're just sitting down in one place in Berlin with a pencil and ruler, just partition Africa anyhow. And in doing that, they did not really care about the ethnic affinities of the people, or about the ethnic affinities, nor even the geographical features of the lands they were dividing. So you have Yoruba people separated into different countries based on what they did. And so, again, I'm trying to recap, but I'm doing it very quickly. We're going to get to the topic, but we're already there. But we're going to get deeper. So he says the result was that people belonging to one and the same linguistic group were split between two or more different colonial powers. And then the reason they did that, of course, was not because they were trying to do anything for us. It was because they were trying to ensure maintenance of law and order and also administrative convenience. Somebody said they drew the line before stepping into Akebuland. There was no Akebuland. No, I'm not talking about Akebuland today, but yeah, whatever you say. Yeah, before, no, they already stepped, to be fair, they were already in Africa. They were already in Africa for centuries before that one, before the Berlin Conference. The Europeans started coming to Africa in the 15th century. This Berlin Conference happened in the 19th century. So Europeans have been coming to Africa for about 400 years before the Berlin Conference. And when I say Europeans, the first sets that moved into Africa at the time were the Portuguese, right? They were in Angola, they were in Nigeria, in Lagos, in Shakiri, Warri area, Benin. By the way, some of them got to Ife in the 16th century, right? And that was when Christianity also got to Ife. But Christianity are going to Shakiri even before then, So all of that has happened. That's this. But when they came, and like I said earlier, and I should repeat also, it wasn't that the Oyinbos came and partitioned and destroyed African unity. There was no African unity before they came. It keeps us bound. That lie keeps us bound. You know why? Because we are looking for something that did not exist in the past, but we are making it look as if it existed, and we are blaming other people for removing what did not even exist in the first place. Therefore, you never build that thing. You only spend your lifetime blaming those people because that never existed, because there was no way, and there is no way you're going to have it. And just in case you think I'm against Pan-Africanism, I don't mind Pan-Africanism if we're talking about travel, business, commerce, cultural exchange, fine. But if we're talking about identity, no. It never existed. It doesn't exist. It will not exist. Prof, Ife in the 16th century, yes. There was a church in Ife in the 17th century, I said. That's the 16th. 1600s, that's the 17th century. There was a church in Ife in the 1600s. But the Oyinbos got to us in the 1400s, mid-15th century. We had a place in church we had a church in Ife called Ileleri. Christianity did not get to Yoruba land. The second time it came in the 19th century, that was the second time, with people like Henry Townsend and David Hindera and so on and so forth. We're going to have that conversation as we go on. But yeah, we had a church way back in the 1600s in Ile-Ife. One day we'll have that session. And also what led to it being shut down, and then what led to it being resuscitated much later. Okay, so I was saying that, you see, the Portuguese had come much earlier, but by the 1800s, they then decided to, just pick their choose and choose their pick. Let me quickly explain something very quickly without going deep into it. You see, originally, the world in Europe with the papal bull was divided into two. There were only two countries that were, this is not part of today's topic, but I hope it's going to help us understand the topic a bit better. And thank you for coming back, Great Ife, on Twitter. Europe had two major power blocks around the 14th century, even before 14th century, but primarily in the 14th century. There were two, the Portuguese and the Spaniards, or the Spanish. The Pope divided the world into two between those two powers. One got the West, the other got the East. The one that got the West was Spain. The one that got the East was Portugal. Sorry, the one that got the West was Spain. The one that got the East was Portugal. That's why it's discovered that all the exploration that happened in America, in Mexico, all those places were led by Spanish people. And everything that happened in Africa, like in Angola, even in Brazil, all those places, the first set of people that you see there were, I'm not saying the only, but the first set of people that actually went to those places were the Portuguese. All right. So even to today, Angola, Mozambique, they still speak Portuguese. Brazil, they speak Portuguese. And the first set of Europeans who also came into our own land were also the Portuguese, because this was the part of the world that they got, when the Pope divided the world in two. But you see, things happened. One of the things that happened, I'm trying not to get into this thing too deep, but let me just explain a little. Some things happened. One of the things that happened was the Protestant Reformation. And with the Protestant Reformation of Martin Luther, the power of the Roman Catholic Church was broken over Europe. In other words, the Pope could not just tell everybody what to do. At the time, the Pope had authority over even the kings. But with what happened with Martin Luther in Germany, by the way, it wasn't just Martin Luther. There were other people, but it was a major force. There was Zwingli, there was John Calvin in Geneva, in Switzerland. But Martin Luther was the major force for the Protestant Reformation. That also spread, and then we have what happened in England, where the Church of England started, and they broke away from the Roman Catholic Church. Why is this important? Because once they broke away, it meant that they could also travel the world and not be restrained by the papal bull from Rome. And that was why, before then, it was only the Spanish and the Portuguese that could take the world. After the Protestant Reformation, other countries went out. And the primary person, or the primary nation, of course, was England. By the way, by the time of Ajayi Crowther, when they were taking the slaves, the country that ensured that the slaves were not taken outside this space was Britain, because the abolition of slavery happened in England. And of course, I'm sure you have heard about, the Clapham sect and William Wilberforce. And I know a lot of people say, oh, but it's because the Industrial Revolution has started. Well, the point is that they stopped it. When they stopped it, the Portuguese were still getting slaves to Brazil, right? To the New World, like they call it then. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that by the 1800s, the dynamics had changed. It wasn't just Portugal and Spain controlling the world. It was the entire, it was many other nations. Let me not say entire. Many other nations in Western Europe, especially England, and then or Great Britain, as it came to be called. So by 1885, they had to have a conference. Of course, Germany as well also rose. They had to have a conference in Berlin where they partitioned Africa. And in doing that, they didn't really care for ethnic identity or linguistic, whatever. They just did what they wanted to do because they wanted to share the booty of war, so to speak. And then when they did it, everybody got their own piece. The crazy part is that some of us were broken into different countries, and they didn't really care about that. So like I said the other day, you have Yoruba people who are indigenous to Nigeria, where we have the bulk of our people, but we're also indigenous to Benin Republic and also to Togo. And we also have groups in faraway Ghana. And of course, after the slave trade, transatlantic slave trade, I should say, after that started, we also now began to have people in Sierra Leone and Gambia. Anyway, the point of all of this, Turenchi, is that the structure that they now gave us was they broke certain ethnic groups and then merged them with other ethnic groups, even though we had nothing in common. You see? So you have the Yoruba people broken into bits, and then we're merged with the Hausas who are also broken into bits, and then the Igbos who are not broken at all, and then, different other groups, the Tiv, so it's like strange bedfellows. Kubu says the Ooni of Ife was baptized as a Christian by Catholic priest sent by Olu Ishekiri, though some say it was Oba of Benin. It was not Oba of Benin. The first one you said was correct. And that Oni abolished idol worship in Ilefe. That's true. We'll talk about it some other time. But yeah, it was Olu of, it's not Olu of Ishekiri, it's Olu of Wari, Olu Iwere. Yeah, it was one who sent, the priest. By the way, they had graduates as far back as the 1600s in Wari from the palace, but we'll talk about that some other time. Anyway, so like I was saying, so they broke ethnic groups and they merged us with other ethnic groups, and then before you know what was happening, everybody's fighting. So Constitutional Conference should have helped us to address that thing, not necessarily to say that let us, like some people have, even today, earlier today, somebody wrote it there, oh, let's break this thing called Nigeria and let Yoruba people merge Yoruba people in Togo and Yoruba people in Ghana, and they will create a new nation. Nothing is impossible, but guess what? That's not how things work. The real issue, that's not where you start with. What you start with is the structure in Nigeria, because this is where you are. You're not going to go to other nations, go and cause wahala there because you have a gym. I have a gym. That's not a gym. That's a nightmare. What you want to do is like, okay, since we're now in Nigeria, we are where we are right now. Can we have a structure that allows us to still be who we were and still be in a country? And that's what I always say. Personally, in my own understanding of Nigeria, I think the best way to understand Nigeria is to see it as a subcontinent or a continent of some sort. It's like Nigeria has more nations within it than Europe. Let me say that slowly. There are more ethnic nations within Nigeria than ethnic nations that exist in Europe. Well, I mean, the only nation that comes close to Nigeria is Russia. Most of the other nations, 2 ethnic groups, 1, 3, 4, 5, but that has to buy. Nigeria has a lot. So which means that if you're going to structure Nigeria, the way it's going to work, we're not going to have people saying things like, I'm a citizen, I can do anything I like. The person has to understand that the culture in this place is different from the culture where you're coming from. So that's what this whole federalism is about. So it says here, though I knew the answers to the questions which the Indian Congress proposal stirred up in my mind, yet I did not feel myself qualified enough to say them aloud. At that time, much more than now, the public status of the person who said a thing counted far more than the intrinsic merit of what was said. So it says here, there was no communal strife in Nigeria as there was in India. All the linguistic groups in Nigeria lived in harmony one with another, and linguistic distinctions did not appear as yet to be a matter of political parties. So before 1938, everything was okay. And that's why, if you remember, we read this, from this book, where the Ogbeni Oja of Ijebu at the time of Chief Adelo Dutola, he said something about before Zik came with his new Africa, the Igbos and Yorubas lived together in harmony. And that's why I say this. And sincerely, if Igbo people will see my heart, many of the things they do, they cause wahala, not be your problem. There's one that is based on your cultural evolution. Another is based on your political evolution. That political evolution started in the 30s. And it started after the formation of the Igbo State Union. We're going to get to it very soon. The Igbo State Union was founded in 1936. And the whole idea of the Igbo State Union was how to thrive in other people's land. If you don't believe me, I promise you I'm going to get there. And in order to thrive, it got to a point where ambition began to overtake wisdom. People just wanted to become something and do anything, including putting the owners of the land down. Zik perfected, so to speak, the system and exported it to his people in the East. And I think that from the 30s, you guys are just behaving in a particular way. I don't know if you behave the same way for the most part. There are, There are exceptions, but the rule is to follow in the footsteps of Zik. But let me also add this. All of us in Nigeria, for the most part, I'm not saying, when I say for the most part, you get the point, there will be exceptions, but all of us, for the most part in Nigeria, depending on where we come from, we follow in the footsteps of the political leaders from our areas in the 1950s and 40s. The ones who rose in your place in the 40s and 50s are the ones you are following, for the most part. And I'm just so blessed to be Yoruba because I have good people to follow. But what Chief Odutola said about Azikiwe at the time, to Azikiwe, in fact, let me read to you so that way I'm able to explain it better. It says here, during the days, no, just back a bit. Okay, all the confusion and tribal hates that were then rearing their heads in the country were the product of Dr. Azikiwe's New Africa. During the days of our old Africa, Chief Odutola remarked, the Igbos and Yorubas lived together as Nigerians. It seemed to me, therefore, that the remedy for the present troubles is this. Azikiwe has brought his New Africa, just like somebody is bringing New Nigeria right now. He has brought his New Africa from America. He should return it there, either by post or by taking it back there personally. If need be, his passage to and fro should be paid by the movement. But mark this, he concluded, unless this Azikiwe's brand of New Africa is done away with, there will be no harmony in this country. How do we know what he was doing? Let me read something to you from another page in this book. It says, by the end of August 1940, I was certain in my own mind that Dr. Azikiwe was not a conscientious member of the Nigerian youth movement, and that for some reasons best known to himself, he was bent on destroying this nationalist organization. What did he do? At the same time, it seemed clear to me that his policy was to corrode the self-respect of the Yoruba people as a group, to build up the Igbos as a master race, to magnify his own vaunted contributions to the nationalist struggles, to dwarf and misrepresent the achievements of his contemporaries, and to discount and nullify the humble but sterling quota which older politicians had made to the country's progress. Why is this important? Is it just that Awo is beefing him? No. You're going to get into what really happened that will give you this understanding. In fact, we already talked about it. If you were not here, please watch the videos. You can watch the live sessions that we had. They're all on YouTube, right? But beyond what happened in the past, before 1940, some things also happened after 1940. I'm going to get into some of those things today. So how was I talking about federalism? Like, it's going to be the best way to structure Nigeria. So it says here, by 1940, I'd already made a name for myself, and I knew that if I spoke my mind in any influential circle, I would command audience, if not support. Nevertheless, I was somewhat hesitant because I knew that in the Nigerian context, my ideas were novel and were likely to evoke acrimonious controversy. But what were his ideas? Let me quickly read his ideas. I argued that Nigeria should have as many provinces, zones, regions, or states as there were linguistic or ethnic groups in the country, and that each region should have a legislature and government of its own. There would be a central parliament and government on which the various linguistic groups in the country would be represented. Under these arrangements, each ethnic group could develop its own peculiar culture and institutions in accordance with its wishes, and the intertribal acrimony and jockeying for leadership which were rearing their heads would cease. The government of each linguistic group would be led by one of their number, and Nigeria would be led by any Nigerian acceptable to all or to the majority of the peoples of the country. Now, that was his own plan, or that was his idea at least, that you have a state. It could be you could call it a state, a region, province, whatever you want to call it. But that region is Yoruba region or Yoruba state. It gives you an idea of a nation within a nation. So all of them, there will be a central parliament where they are represented, but then they are representing. So again, you don't have majority group or minority. No matter how small you are represented. No matter how big you are represented. And that was the plan that Awo had at the time. But when he shared this in 1940, he was shot down by his friends who thought his stuff, it was true, but it was too explosive. They said the ideas were bright and ingenious, but highly explosive. But when what happened in 1941 happened, where Azikiwe used the Ijebu to destroy NYM by ensuring that Ijebu people and Igbo people pulled out of NYM, and like I said earlier, which became the beginning of the end of the movement, Olo began to talk about this whole idea, and he said something very powerful. He says here, it says, language lay at the root of racial differences, be they differences in culture and custom, in philosophy of life and political institutions, in national characteristics and social concepts and practices. I referred to some of the writings of Dr. Azikiwe, from which it appeared that he would abolish the institution of obaship and chieftaincy if he had the power. 2023 election, some people literally said this, and they're from the same region as Azikiwe. Let's remove their Oba. Let's do this to them. Let's do that. Why? Now, to be honest, as a Yoruba person, when you hear that, it rubs you off the wrong way. It makes no sense. Like, it's stupid to say that. But you know, sometimes I pause for a minute and say, okay, why would this person be this dumb? To be fair, it's dumb. The person is very dumb to say it. In fact, the people are dumb to say it, and it's a cultural thing, like I always say. 1 second, guys. All right, it's a dumb thing to say. Oh dear, sorry. It's a dumb thing to say, but why would they say that? The reason they say it is because they don't have a cultural frame of reference like the Yoruba people. So, for instance, Azikiwe said he was inferring that he was going to remove kings, or the concept of obaship. So when you read this book, My Odyssey, was published in 1970. That was his own autobiography. He mentioned there that the world has gone beyond aristocracy, and that his own birth was just an accident. Like, it's just accident of nature that he was born where he was born. There's no big deal about it. You can't, talk to people based on how they were born. Now, that sounds very altruistic and egalitarian. Once you discover that the idea basically was to erase the uniqueness of other people, where all of us are now the same, there's nobody special. That thing, it doesn't really make everybody equal. It causes rancor. Why? Because if you're from a place where your own culture has not developed enough to even have central governance or central government, and the apex of leadership where you're coming from is clan, there's no way you're going to fit into my own idea of leadership. And people of God, people listening to me, please, let's try and understand what I'm saying. I've said this before, I'll quickly say it again. You see, the Yoruba people started having, when we started out, every culture, you start from the human, the hunter-gatherer, caveman, hunter-gatherer, and then you get into a point where you have families. Now, family become a unit of government, so to speak. Even till today, family is still the smallest unit of government. So you have the family. But as you evolve, you get to the point where you now have more than one family. So you have several families, and then you come together. That's like a clan. Okay? Many clans, of course, will make the tribe. And then you have, so for Yoruba land, let me explain quickly. We have our own smallest, smallest political unit is not family. Family is still a unit, though, like, so on your own, of course, everybody is Guinea boy. Even that family is developing from something. Let me say it this way, so as to sound nice, so as to sound better. Family is the smallest political unit, the highest, I should say, the highest that we have is at the town level, at the city level. What I just said right now is a very, very complex thought. So you have, when we started out, of course, we have family. From family, we had the clan. Then from clan, we had what was called Elu in Ife at the time. The Elus were societies or communities. So you have different communities, small communities. It's similar to what you're going to refer to today as autonomous communities. Each community has its own king. That's the difference between where we were then and where Igbo people are. Now, the compound is family. That's Agbole. So the man is heading his own family. Many heads form Agbole. Right? And that Agbole is like a clan. Right? And then from the clans, you now have like a community. That community would have in some other places, I don't know, I mean, we know what they have, but in Yoruba land, the community heads back then had kings. But they couldn't speak to what was happening in that community close to them. Everything was, go and play. Everything. It's okay. All right. Everything that happened within that autonomous community is governed by the king of that community. But some time ago, and this was thousands of years ago, some would say about 1,500, some people say 1,200, but it was definitely more than 1,000 years ago. An idea came to the people there and said, you know what, instead of having, I mean, we have to expand. Economic purposes, survival purposes, there's land to conquer, there are animals, there are all kinds of things around. We have to work together as a group. So in order to be able to take advantage of what we have ecologically and environmentally, let's have this union of sorts where we're still going to maintain our distinctiveness and our autonomy, but we can work together for certain things. So we're going to have what we now today call confederacy. So we created a confederacy in Ife, and the idea basically was that the eldest of all the kings will be the chairman of the confederacy. So we had 13 communities in Ife at the time, and then the eldest of them, that's 8. So it was based on gerontocracy essentially. The eldest would be the chairman. The first chairman in Ife was the man that we now call, that we know now. I mean, we've always known him as Oranfe, but today we call him Oranfe Onile now. And of course, the last was Obatala. Now, they were not the heads of Ife. They were the king. They were. It's like the motto of UI, Primus inter pares. It's first among equals. So you are the king of the kings, not the king of the town. There was no town. You had the different communities, and then you had somebody who headed the heads of those communities. Not that he was the head of the town. And I like to say that because there was no head of Ife until Oduduwa. What Oduduwa did was to do what nobody ever did before him, to now bind the 13 communities together through several complex politicking and statecraft. Another time we're going to talk about the details of that. But then they did a lot of work and put everything together, created checks and balances, created different arms of government. There was legislature, there was executive, there was judiciary. Okay? Now, all of this, by the way, this point I'm talking about, this particular event happened 1,000 years ago. It happened in the 11th century, in the 1000s. This is 2025. That's about 1,000 years ago. And so by his time, we started having what we now call city-states. The best way to understand the concept of city-states, if you don't understand it very well in Yoruba, I'll use Yoruba, but the ones that more people talk about a lot is the Greek states. You have Sparta, you have Athens. They are all Greek states. You have Macedon or Macedonia. You know, you have all those places, but they are all towns on their own. The first person to do that in our space is Oduduwa, creating Ife as a city-state. Now, I'm going somewhere with this Turenchi. that city-state then became the highest in terms of political structure or governance in Yoruba land. And that system was exported to all parts of Yoruba land. Everybody was already Yoruba, but not everybody was practicing that system. So what he introduced in Ife was exported to Oyo, was exported to Ekiti, Ondo, even to Benin, all over the place. So everybody basically just copied that thing. And that's why, I think we had a session where I mentioned that it got to a point where in order to even be certified that you are really a Yoruba king, you have to get your crown and your staff from Ife. And of course, that's where the whole bead economy came into play. But we're going to have another session to discuss that. Why am I saying all of this to Renchi? You see, for Yoruba people, there's a king. The king has a cabinet. There's a way they can check him. Then they also have the judiciary, which is the Ogboni, that can also check him. Now, apart from what you have at the top with the executive and the judiciary, you also now have quarter chiefs who report to the king. And then with those quarter chiefs, you have chiefs of Igberiko, right? So like the Bales, who are in charge of their own towns, but also report to the king. Then you now have quarters. Then in the quarters, you have the family compounds. Then in those family compounds, you have families. The family compounds where you have clans, right? And then you now have the head of the homes, families, and everything. Now, what I just did right now, I just tried to shrink a lot of things. One day, I'm going to have a full session to discuss everything, right? But the point is, I'm trying to make is this. If you have such a complex structure, and you now are put in a country like Nigeria, and you have another group whose highest form of politicking is clan, you have king. Again, when we say having a king, it's not like, what does it really mean? It's not just king. It means a lot. If you did not have a king in the last 500 years, I can assure you, in the last 300 years, last 200 years, I can assure you your culture is primitive. And that's why you would not see a group that had no central authority who would ever be able to build an empire. It's not possible. How do you harness the strength of different groups of people if there's nobody at the center commanding the, and that's why you see a lot of people longing for unitary system in the 1960s. It came from the fact that what we did 1,000 years ago, they still haven't done it. Because everybody yearns for that thing where you're able to have that power, but the time has passed. You have created an identity. You people have been able to create that thing. Now, if you are not there yet, I'm not saying there's something wrong with you. Whenever you wake up is your morning. That's okay. The point is that I cannot be rude the way you will be rude. For instance, in certain parts of Nigeria, people say that every single person is a king. You cannot have development like that. It's possible. You can have physical development or individual development, but you cannot have collective growth. Because who's going to lead all of us when all of us are Oga? These are some of the things that are affecting the growth of Nigeria. Everybody thinks we should all be, because we're all Nigeria, we're all the same. We don't have the same cultural reference. Again, I'm not saying one is better than the other. I'm just saying that one is more developed, and it's the truth, unless we're lying to ourselves. Let me recommend a book on this particular matter. Please read Path to Nigerian Freedom by Awolowo. It was Papa's first book, published in 1947. It goes deep into some of these things. Somebody says Rome was a city-state that became the Roman Empire. Thank you very much, Kubo, for that. You have to have a city-state, and the reason for that is because, okay, how do you get soldiers? In a setting where you have individualistic mindset, who will go and fight? Why would I fight for you? You have to have soldiers, right? You cannot have economic power without centralization at the time. Even today, why is Southwest the second? I mean, look at the, no, not second. It's not even second, it's the first. Why does Southwest, people say it's Lagos, but it's not just Lagos. There are things in Lagos that, like I mentioned yesterday, there are things in Lagos that are owned by all the 6 states of Southwest, put in place by AWO. And we're going to get into how they were able to do that. They had a mindset that was built on what Oduduwa did, and they carried it into the 1940s. We have to carry it into the 2020s and say to our children and keep taking it on to 20. Jesus is The point is that there's a frame of reference of oneness, of ancestry, of one ethnicity, one ancestry, one language, one culture. There are groups in Nigeria, for instance, whose, again, no shades, so I won't mention any group, whose identity, I mean, each group had an identity, but they were put together and said, this is your identity now. And the person who did that was the British. There is no way you're going to govern this one like that one. That's the point we have in Nigeria. So it's not so much of what I'm better than you. It's not about that. It's I'm different. And in our differences, we are going to have different political structures. So what I was saying is this: those of us who want kings, right now, you can say the kings don't have as much power as they used to have, but they still have a role to play. For instance, we don't have mayors in Yoruba land. The kings are the equivalent of what you call mayors in the US, for instance. They have an entire city to govern, but they have no role in government. But that's stuff for another day. By the way, that's one of the reasons for the House of Chiefs before independence. But let's get back into this. So Awo says here that Azikiwe was talking about abolishing the institution of obaship and chieftaincy if he had the power. While such a proposition might be acceptable to his followers in and from the eastern region, where the British had experimented with varying degrees of success and failure with warren chiefs, it would not do for the western provinces and the northern provinces. In other words, what Azikiwe could do in the east, excuse me. So in the east, they had no kings, right? And they even have a saying, Igbo Ewenze, no kings. The British had to introduce warren chiefs within the direct rule system. For them, they hate that idea. I mean, good or bad, it's okay. They hate it, or they hated it. Therefore, for him to say they want to remove government or whatever, or sorry, remove obaship in Yoruba, it will make sense to them because they don't even like that point. But the point is that what is the business with what's happening in Yoruba land? That's the issue. And the reason is because of the kind of constitution we operated at the time. So he says, while such a proposition might be acceptable to his followers in and from the eastern region, where the British had experimented with varying degrees of success and failure with warren chiefs, it would not do for the western provinces and the northern provinces, where traditional chiefships had been established from time immemorial. And then he says something interesting. He says the implicit and unshaken loyalty which the Igbos had shown to Dr. Azikiwe during the Ikoli Akesanya crisis did not arise, in my view, from ideological faith, but rather from linguistic affinity and ethnic self-assertion. In other words, the Igbos did not support Azikiwe because he had a better ideology. They supported him because he was Igbo. It's the exact same thing like when I say that the Igbos did not support Peter Obi because he had a better ideology. They supported him because he was Igbo. And they know that to be true, but they will never admit. Because admittance of that will show that, let me put it this way, admittance of that fact will reveal their hypocrisy. It was because, and guess what? I don't have any problem with that. Do you? I apologize for this. You got to come closer. All right. So if that's what you want to do it. But don't turn around and say you are doing it because he has one. I mean, manifesto. We don't even know the manifesto till today. The first, by the way, that was the second time in history. Maybe it happened other times, but the second time in history that someone was saying that I'm not going to talk about my manifesto so you won't steal it. Azikiwe did something similar in 1951. Nigeria history is sweet. 1 second. Motiko ketente uluwa machenchabo. Where were we? So he says here, the implicit and unshaken loyalty which the Igbos had shown to Dr. Azikiwe during the Ikoli Akesanya crisis did not arise, in my view, from ideological faith, but rather from linguistic affinity and ethnic self-assertion. This, I warned, was an ominous pointer to the future. Nigeria under a unitary constitution might be dominated by those, whatever their number, who hold greater allegiance to ethnic affinity than to principles and ideals. History has shown us that Papa was right. We saw it, for instance, in the First Republic. we saw, for instance, how a particular ethnic group decided to dominate the civil service. Now, if you're Yoruba and you have not read this thing, they will tell you it was because they were qualified. That's not true. There's nothing close to the truth in that statement. They were not qualified. It was nepotism at its worst. You had 70% of NRC. You had about 50% of the NRC, about 70% of the Port Authority, Nigerian Airways, everywhere dominating, and they were dominating not because they were qualified. As a matter of fact, I think I've said it before. There was a messenger. A messenger in the Nigerian Railway Corporation. This was in early 1960s, so the report was from 1964. By the way, that report is in Radio Meet Global. So if you join us on Telegram, you'll find it. You find it in our resource section. It's called White Paper on Alignment of Nigerian Politics, 1964. It was bad to the point where a janitor was made the chairman of the selection committee of a recruitment exercise. In other words, we want a new engineer, but the chairman of that recruitment or recruiting committee was a janitor who just retired as a janitor. And the only thing that janitor had to be able to occupy that post was his ethnicity. Folks who tell you to forget your ethnicities are not telling you because they want to build a new Nigeria. And if they want to build a new Nigeria, I can assure you the idea is to build it in their own image and likeness, where everything was dominated. And that's what you saw from 1960 to 1944. And that happened because, like the document I'm always referring to, one of these days, Madebe, we're going to get there. We're going to get there. We're almost there. You will see how the thing was planned and how it was executed and how it was topped. It was topped in 64, which necessitated the first coup. The first coup that was executed was in 1966, but the first coup that was planned was in 1964. And before they even planned that first coup, the first idea was to secede. The Eastern region was going to secede in 63, 64. The reason, of course, was because of census issues. But 64 was when Ojukwu planned his own coup. 65 was when the first coup that was executed was planned. 66 was when they got into power again. And between January 16 and July 29 of 66, what happened between 60 and 64 also happened at the national level. As we go on in this conversation, we'll get into it. Just to tell you that when you discover that a particular ethnic group in Nigeria is always asking you for soldiers because they lost an election, they are saying, oh, we want the military to take over, we need strong men. When they start talking that nonsense, just understand the fact that nobody today, it don't happen before. And I'm saying this again, I be like the voice in the wilderness, just warning us. But we have to at least, let's see what has happened in the past so we don't repeat the errors of the past. So I was saying here that everything where the Igbo people do for Zik that time, nobody say now because he get better idea, and just because in the Igbo. And so if this is how it's going to go, why not structure the country to acknowledging that, so that you have made provision, right, for that particular human, should I say human frailty or human nature? And so we talked about all of this last week, and then we also mentioned the memorandum that was written to the Chief Secretary of the government in 1942, where Papa mentioned the fact that Nigeria should be let me just read what he says. We of the Nigerian Youth Movement are visualizing, let me take it again. What we of the Nigerian Youth Movement are visualizing is a Nigeria in which the various linguistic units will federate to form a single nation. So we don't have Oyo State or Benue State. In Benue, you can have many states. Now, of course, the way you're going to federate will be different. The larger groups would be different from the smaller groups. For the smaller groups, for instance, you might have it at the level of provinces, then they coalesce at the regional level, and then they meet at the federal, because they are small. So, and the reason, of course, is not because they don't have a right to do it, it's because they don't have the viability to make it work. So if you have small groups, so for instance, South South, Middle Belt, Northeast. You have a lot of ethnic groups in those places. Let me not run that, let me not run ahead of myself. But the point is that for the smaller groups, there's a different plan, the way they're going to be structured. But the point is that each person feels seen, and each person is able to do what they want to do in their own land. Not that a person will move. Me, I'm Yoruba. I don't have a right. Even now, with the kind of constitution we have now, safe, I don't have a right to be moving anywhere and telling them that I'm on Nigeria, I can do anything I like. Because even though it's not in the constitution, their own culture will push back at it. But what I'm always saying is that we should have factored that into the constitution. Let's get back into this. So it says here, okay, so let's move very fast. Okay, so what happened in 41 and 42, of course, helped Baba to, stay true to his own ideals of federalism. All right. And then he also mentioned what happened in 1943 when the Igbo Federal Union changed their name. 1 second. And I think at this point, I want to read another book. On board. Please, thank you very much on TikTok. Please don't stop our tapping. I'd like to read, where shall I? Jesus, you're a wonder. Big. So, 1 second. Now this is Bakweri. Okay, I think it's this one. So I'm going to read quickly from a paper. This is from the Journal of Applied Philosophy, Department of Philosophy, Imo State. Surely, Nisha. Number. You know what? I think it's this one, but I have to open it and other stuff. Which one did I just open now? Okay. Just give me a second. We're going to have a great time. We'll end on a high note. I love to praise your name. All right. Let's open this from the other stuff. I want to just read to us the evolution of groups. Believe it or not, I'm just beginning to get into this topic at 4 minutes to 7. And I make us sometimes this news, it can get very interesting. You just be enjoying the news, and the reason, to be fair, one of the reasons I stay with the news sometimes is because, listen, guys, if you once you begin to look at the news through the prism of the lens of Nigeria's history, it's a bit, it becomes quite interesting. So you want to stay with it because it's as if I can explain the past with today's news, so that's why it also happens like that. But let's read 2 books. We're coming back to our autobiography in a bit. I'll first read from Anthony Nauro. Number. Okay. So I found one book. In fact, I found the second book as well. I'm just trying to find the page. I found the two books already. So brilliant. So let's start from, I'm going to read this. This is Anthony Nauro, was a speech delivered at Addis Ababa, 12th August 1968. It says, by 1947, when the Richards Constitution was being considered in government circles in Lagos and the Colonial Office in London, ethnic group consciousness had become a fact of life in Nigeria. The first ethnic cultural organization, the Ibibio Union, was born at this time. Actually, the union was born in 1928, but it started getting a bit political, or more political, in the 1940s. So it says, the first ethnic cultural organization, the Ibibio Union, was born. Others sprang up, but like the Igbo Union, became more political in character than the pioneer Ibibio Union. So originally, when people formed their unions, and I'll explain why this happened, when people formed their socio-cultural unions, it was for the purpose of, cultural, maybe culture preservation, development of their space, things like that. It was about them, to make themselves better and things like that. But when Igbo Union started, it was very political. Why? We're going to get there very soon. Let me just finish this one. So when Igbo Union started, everybody started becoming very political. And so it says here, they became more political in character like the Igbo Union than the pioneer Ibibio Union. Unfortunately, Sir Arthur Richards ignored the diversity of the cultures and peoples of Nigeria, and a federation of 3 massive regions was imposed on Nigerians on 2nd August 1946, when the Richard Constitution was promulgated. Agitation for ethnic self-determination and cultural sovereignty grew in the late 1940s. Events fed the flames of agitation. In 1945, a prominent Igbo lawyer, Charles Onyema, a member of the Central Legislative Council, said in a public statement in Lagos that the Igbo domination of Nigeria was only a matter of time. These statements sparked off attacks on Igbos in other parts of Nigeria. This statement intensified the growth of ethnic and cultural unions throughout Nigeria. There sprang up the Edo Union, the Calabar Improvement League, the Egbe Modudua, the Ijaw Progressive Union, and so on. The fear of domination of the rest of Nigeria by any one ethnic group reinforced the search for a form of government in Nigeria, which would prevent it. In 1947, Chief Obafemi Awolowo, a Yoruba, in his book, Path to Nigerian Freedom, suggested the division of Nigeria into 40 states with cultural and linguistic affinity as the basis of the vision. Anyway, I mentioned that book earlier. Let me also recommend it. I think it's a very brilliant book. And if you want it, please check Read Me Books on Telegram. You will find it there. Path to Nigerian Freedom. Okay? If time permits, we are going to visit that one as well. Now, let me read the second book. Again, I'm trying to build something. Please stay with me. Stay with me. You are all I need. Dum, 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 dum. I'm going to read from the Journal of Applied Philosophy. This paper is titled Igbo in the Context of the Debate About Ethnicity and Nation Building. It's written by Ndubisi Uchechukwu, Dr. Ndubisi Uchechukwu, Ironafe, History Department, Abia State University. Now let's get into this. Yeah, I found it. We're going somewhere. So please, don't leave me. All right, so this is the document I mentioned earlier. It says here, okay. The fortunes of the Igbo had been a checkered one, as there were several ups and downs or turbulence in our political history, despite our immense contributions to the well-being of the Nigerian state. It's an Igbo writing, so more read waiting they get to talk. The resilience of the Igbo against the colonial British conquest gave the impression that the Igbo were very difficult and ungovernable people. It's not the impression, it's the fact. It's the fact. The British said it. Anyway, let's just read what he said, and I'll I don't want to stop. Ota supports the above when he writes that the disturbing experience which the British had subduing Igbo created in them the impression that the Igbo were ungovernable. According to him, it was the dehumanizing nature of Igbo migrants to Lagos, which prompted the formation of Igbo Federal Union in 1936 and later Igbo State Union in 1948. Most importantly, the union helped in easing the transplantation of new migrants from the certainties and security of village life to the uncertainties and hostility of life in an urban environment. The forming of Igbo State Union triggered other ethnic groups. I'm trying to jump. In fact, let me just read everything so it doesn't look like Audrey Smoke agrees with the above submissions when he writes that in Nigeria, immigrants to urban centers began to form ethnic unions in the late 1920s in the attempt to provide for security in the alien and sometimes hostile environment. According to him, the Igbo unions became multi-purpose when they financed community development projects such as building of schools and the endowments of scholarships. The forming of Igbo State Union triggered other ethnic groups who read I'm going somewhere. It says here, the forming of Igbo State Union triggered other ethnic groups who read political meanings into its formation, forming rival groups to counter the Igbo Union. Excuse me. Forming counter groups to counter the Igbo Union, except the Ibibio Union, founded in 1928, which predates the Igbo Union. Only opines that in 1945, a pan-Yoruba union, the Egbe Modudua, was formed in London by Yoruba students, including Obafemi Awolowo. The Yoruba Brotherly Society, later Yoruba Progress Union, was set up in 1931. The formation of all these inclusive ethnic groups, such as Idoma, Tiv, Biron, and Bakwari. Initially, the formation of the Igbo State Union did not have any political undertone. It was aimed at alleviating the suffering of Igbo migrants in Lagos. In support of the above, Coleman submits that the most non-Yoruba residents in Lagos suffered varying forms of discrimination, particularly in regard to housing. They've been having issues with housing since 1936. Before 36. Why so? We heard from the gentleman earlier, Duru Bond. So whatever you are seeing right now in terms of accommodation issues, it did not start today. And the reason, I won't lie, the reason is the culture. A culture that does not assimilate, a culture that does not integrate, will find it very difficult to be welcomed in places like Yoruba land. I mean, they are going to allow you do what you want to do, but there are certain things that you think you can have based on your entitlement mentality you never get because you have been isolated based on your own culture. And the crazy part is that because you don't understand evolution, you think people hate you. You don't understand the fact that you are the problem. Whenever people say things like, I cannot bow, I cannot do this, I cannot do that, he thinks he's asserting confidence. What he's doing is that he's relieving generational trauma. But that's stuff for another day. Let's continue. So he says here, a Pan-Igbo conference was held in Port Harcourt in December 1948. Igbo leaders at the conference were quite familiar. It was actually 49, but okay, 48, yeah. The one in 49 was in Aba. Igbo leaders at the conference were quite familiar with the poignant injustice of subordination, which colonial rule was meting out to the Igbo ethnic group, vis-a-vis the Efik and the Yoruba. They also realized that nothing could serve as enough psychological compensation except the coming together of the various segments making up the Igbo nation. I'm going somewhere with this. Again, we're going to arrive there very soon. I'm reading this just to explain something. Number one, that there was a Ibibio Union founded in 1928. That there was Urobo in 1931. That these groups, formed in order to help each other, help the environment, support each other, and things like that. And that in 36, the Igbo started forming their own unions. And the reason, of course, was because they felt they said they were being discriminated against, and that they had issues with colonial government. They had issues with the other places where they were staying, so they wanted to be able to come together and make certain demands and alleviate their own issues. Now, when you read this book, when you read this book, you get the idea that, hey, that was what it was all about. But the question is that really what it was all about? Now, I'm going to go into what happened with Yoruba group. I want you to read this one. I'll go deeper into it tomorrow. For 1 second. Let me read to you something. Everything I'm doing right now, I'm trying to wet the ground for Ola. $125, I think. Folks on Twitter, thank you for being here. I know you can't see what we're doing, but I'm glad that you are here with us. The truth is that by 1964, we're going to read it later. By 1964, it became very clear that 8 years after the Igbo State Union was formed, he began to cook up plans to dominate Nigeria. And in that document, which I'm going to read it tomorrow, I promise. I don't want to, if I start opening this, if I'm start looking for the book, it's here, but I don't want to move things around because of time. It's going to take me time. The document was signed by two people, Mbadewe, Ozumba Mbadewe, and Mbanugo. The idea basically was that in 1944, 8 years after they started Igbo unions, and they have Igbo State Union, they came up with the idea of dominating the entire space. And that document that I'm talking about was signed by those two in 1964, and they refer to what they started doing in 1944. Now, like Anthony Nauro said, it was the formation of Igbo Federal Union that caused a lot of people to begin to get very, very political with their groups. And according to the Yoruba people, according to Awolowo, the Yoruba had no groups at this point. We had nothing that brought us together. I think I should let him speak for himself. So take a listen to this. No, there was no Yoruba Union at the time. There was no Yoruba. Yoruba did not even have any group at this point. So he says here, the Yorubas were a highly progressive but badly disunited group. This was in 1941. Right? As at 1941, we were badly disunited. Which is why, by the way, there are some people saying certain things about what's happening in traditional rulership and stuff in Yoruba land. Let me just say something to you. Whilst it is good to set the record straight, Isheda Isheta Jetete, one can say bed Jetagunro. To bat it your later fẹ́ tún ọ̀rọ̀ lè ṣe, fẹ́ tún ọ̀rọ̀ lè tò. Èyàn kì í já ní àjàtàn nínú ilé. Àwọn ọ̀tàn tí ò bá ti ní jẹ́ kí yóò bá tó máa jẹ́ ká ní ìfàsẹ́yìn, ẹ jẹ́ á máa rọra ká máa ṣọ́ ṣe. Ọ̀pọ̀lọpọ̀ nǹkan wà tó máa fi ránṣẹ́ sí mi pé kémi náà sọ̀rọ̀ sí mi ní dáhùn. Tí bá mo mọ̀ kọ́ tí màá sọ o, àìlè sọ̀rọ̀ kọ́ ni o. Ó kàn jẹ́ wípé èmi máa kàn yan màdé filẹ̀. E.g. ọ̀rọ̀ Ifẹ̀ kìíní kan. Let me say something. In fact, I should also make it clear. Àwọn kan náà wà dé pé wọ́n rò pé àwọn ọgbọ́n, wọ́n dẹ̀ gọ̀. When you hear people, for instance, I know I'm moving stop or I'm going back to the book in a bit. When you hear people say, for instance, saying things like, Ifẹ̀ is the spiritual capital, this other one is the political capital, and then one said, Ooni of Ife should be. One day somebody said something on Twitter. I wrote it. I said, the Ooni of Ife is not a priest. He is a king and a deity. That's what I wrote there. I said he is a king and a deity. That is why he's called Onirisha. Ife is not just the spiritual capital of Yoruba people. It is the spiritual capital, the cultural capital, the political capital. And the Oyo that is becoming the thing that I see it every day. They send me messages, I just don't talk about it. But Oyo is the capital of the Oyo Empire. And there are many people that call themselves, that we now call Yoruba today, that were not part of that empire. But they acknowledge Ife as their source. They do this thing of this tokenism, right? Where you just, there's a word I'm looking for. It starts with P. Patronizing. When you patronize Ife and say they are the spiritual capital, that's nonsense. And it's these people who just came up with this idea. So everybody's trying to assert something. You are taking us back to the 1800s and early 1900s, where people were bickering among themselves. Everybody now trying to, and that's the funny thing. People don't think generationally. They don't think as. That's why I said your national thing that you're always talking about. You are fighting for Yoruba nation, but you're saying that one or your is bigger than Yoruba. But in your mind, but in your mind, you are trying to do Yoruba nation. You are joking. You are a joker. Because you don't even understand the fact that, number one, Yoruba nation is not coming. It is here. And based on what it is, you can build on it to have what you want. That's what Awo did. Are we not calling them geniuses today? That's what the Awo did. You understand the structure, and I'm going to read the Mumbo, I just wanted to say it. You understand what it is, and then you work with it. Not that you'll be changing stories. And then the other people who are also trying to correct them, you also start, before I see what's happening, everybody's saying, Kini kon Alaafin, like, you can't insult Alaafin now. How? Say because you have an argument. Because you want to prove that, how would you insult Alaafin? You're not making any point with that. You are destroying the house the more. You know, something happened. I won't go into the details. Something happened at the Oyo in the Alaafin's palace that became an issue. Some people reached out to me. Let me just say it in public. I won't go deep. Some people reached out to me on what they thought we should do. So I said to the person, I'm a Prince of Ife. I can't do this thing. I can't do this thing. So to what end? Oh, maybe they're even going to bring money and everything, but to what end? You know, we come here on social media, some things happen that I don't talk about. Many of them I cannot. I thank God for what He's doing with our platforms, but we have to be very careful. So we have to make a point. This is what happened. If you can do this and you can do that. I'm like, okay, so he did something wrong. We should now take it out, and so what will now happen, Jari? You're not uniting Yoruba people now. Some of the people are talking are not small boys. Like, but you're not uniting. You're not uniting us. Again, I think either we don't know our history or we've forgotten it. There was a time when Alera was Soju, and the primary reason was the Kiriji War. For 16 years, we fought amongst ourselves. It took Britain, and people don't like to acknowledge it, but it's true. One of the reasons, not the only reason, but one of the reasons we stopped was Britain. The other one, of course, was Alajobi. But Britain did a lot of it. In fact, let me just read a bit more. The Yorubas were a highly progressive but badly disunited group. They paid lip service to a spiritual union and affinity in a common ancestor, Oduduwa. But in all their long history, they had waged wars against one another. When the Portuguese and the British had visited their coasts in the course of their slave trade, the Yorubas had shown no qualm of conscience in conducting violent and merciless slave raids on one another. These intertribal wars and slave raids had come to an end under the so-called Pax Britannica. That was what Britain did. Exactly. But àwọn tó ń ṣàtàkùsà náà ó yẹ ká sọ fún wọn díẹ̀díẹ̀ a máa ra máa pẹ́ sọ ni. But tó bá ti débi kan mí ìgbà kan ó máa tẹ́ point kan tí màá sọ̀rọ̀ but kò tí yà. These intertribal wars and slave raids had come to an end under the so-called Pax Britannica. Also, ẹ mọ̀ jẹ́ àmọ́ pa irọ́ fún ara wa. Oh, we never did something. But we did. Why do you think Yoruba people don't fight today? It's not for fear. It's what you do when you are fought. You know that peace is better than war. Any group that you see shouting, want to fight, want to fight, want to fight, they've never understood what it really means. Or maybe their parents are longing for, maybe they lost one war and they think they are going to try again so that they can win. But we have won, we have lost, we have won, we have lost. At the end of the day, you still have to come to the table And that's why we have what we have at Okay Messi. So it says the intertribal wars and slave raids had come to an end under the so-called Pax Britannica, but the mutual hatred and acerbity which were attendant on them lingered. There are two reasons Yoruba people did not have a cohesive group in the 1940s, early 40s, in the 30s into the early 40s. Number one was the fact that we were just recovering from our last war. Again, Kiriji was 16 years of fighting. Our Konja, 30 months. We've not been on Tijakari that's in 1970. Our 16 years. The Nigerian Civil War was not up to 3 years, or it was 2.5 years. It was 30 months. And you have people who are always crying about it. They will not allow you to rest. They will even lie and make up history. Amongst ourselves, we didn't fight for 20 months or 30 months. We fought for 16 years. And because of that, we have mutual hatred and suspicions of each other. This is why I tell people, whatever thing that is going, that wants to make you do whatever you want to do, just remember the fact that these people lived in the 1940s. But for them, yes, we're a progressive nation, but we were divided. And we're not divided because we hated each other. It was because we had wars amongst ourselves. And even after the war ended, everybody was suspecting the other person. So, boy, so okay, you don't see me, Ijebu, Ibadan, and Ikiti, Ijesha. Everybody had those things. That's the first one. The second one was external. The one that's internal, we have acknowledged it. And thank God they were able to resolve it. And we're not going to go back to it by God's grace. The second one was external. And that one I think is happening again. I'll read that to you now. Furthermore, the propaganda of Dr. Azikiwe was already having a deleterious effect on a once dynamic group. The Yorubas now indulge in mutual recrimination and condemnation. The younger elements thought that the Yorubas were inferior to the go-ahead Igbo people and that whatever might be their past glories, they had become effete and decadent. To capital, it was freely bandied about that the Yorubas were no longer capable of leadership in any sphere of life. In other words, the external part is when people come to you and suggest to you that you are somehow inferior to them in quality. Meanwhile, the person talking doesn't even have what you have. But then you now say, oh, I get them before, no be waiting. How did they talk them? How they talk that thing? Na pidgin, huh? I get them before, no be. How people are still hearing me on Twitter? No be property. If people don't speak pidgin, even me who just started learning pidgin. Yeah, but thank you for responding. Okay, I get that before, don't be property. Say, oh, all this your empire is in the past. Your people were saying that to themselves. Your people were cutting themselves down, whittling themselves, just to say, look at this other group. They are go-getters. You know how I know this thing is true? This, by the way, this book was published in 1960. It was referring to what happened in the 30s and 40s. And I know it's true because I saw it in 2025. I saw it last month. A Yoruba person said, the Yoruba, you have to man up because look at the Igbos. They are brave. These are people who somehow think that calmness and timidity are synonyms, and that recklessness and bravery are also synonyms. A person who is calm, who is telling you be careful, Rora does not mean that they are telling you not to do stuff. It's caution. And giri is not boldness, it's recklessness. So when you have to begin to cut yourself to a particular level of comparing yourself with another group in order to say, oh, look, I think she gone. I come mama shaking, but you had this, you didn't. But we forget, you know, one history. Let's just talk about what's happening right now. Look at them. And that came because of what Papa said happened by the end of 1940. Between 38 and 1940, what did Papa say Ezekiel was about? Number one was that he wanted to corrode the self-respect of the Yoruba people. And the way he did it was by building up the Igbo as a master race. And if you read the speech in 1949 Igbo Congress, if you say I'm lying after reading that speech, that means that you are not thinking straight. No apologies. And there are worse words I could use, but I'm not going to use. But you're going to listen to it, and then you can put 1 and 2 together, and then you can arrive at hopefully 3. In some cases, you can get 13 sharp, but it depends. Somebody says volume increase. I did try. Oh, sorry. Maybe the mic is... Thank you for bringing that to my notice, by the way. Thank you. Give me to call. I hope it's better now on Twitter. Thank you very much for bringing that to my attention. All right. So essentially what we're saying is that what issues, sorry, excuse me. The issues that we're having in the 30s is also what we are now having now. When you now compare yourself with people and say, they are doing kiniko, what you don't realize is that sometimes when people move into your space, especially when they know that they have to take care of home, it's like, okay, think about it. You know, some people say it, Nigerians say it, which is of course not very smart. You move to the UK and say, all the people are lazy. Have you ever seen anybody say it? They move to the UK, you start hearing things like everybody's lazy. The people they're not. See, it's their home. Now you know what send you come out Nigeria. They don't have your problem. Oh, I'm not saying that it's a perfect life. I'm not saying that they should live like that. But I'm saying that this thing you are saying, if you are so hardworking, how about stay back at home and be hardworking and make life better for yourself? It's the thing you say in order to make up for something. And also, if the people of the land don't have self-respect, they then begin to say that, and they start calling your parents lazy. Meanwhile, you have never visited the house of the quote-unquote immigrants. Visit their home. Understand the culture. This unity that, and I'll say it again, this unity that we're always shouting about in Yoruba land, we must unite, we must unite. The person who is preaching that unity to you, go back to their house. Say you are doing research. Go and do some research. How united is this wonderful culture? You can challenge yourself with the greatness of another group, but don't cut yourself down because you're comparing yourself with them, especially when you don't even know the details. Meanwhile, you don't know the details. Let me not say more than that. You don't know the details. So he says, Azikwe's propaganda was already having effect. And that's the only reason you can have a lot of Yoruba people telling you things like, I'm Yoruba, but I understand we need Kiniko presidency. And I'm looking at the person that, everything that you are hearing is nothing more than empathy and naivety. Actually, more naivety than empathy, to be honest. But the naivety is a product of empathy that has been weaponized by another group. So in your naivety, you are coming up with stuff, but the person who weaponized that empathy, he knows he's manipulating you. And I've said something before, I'll say it again. What will make you say some of these statements of Yoruba bots and Kiniko? There are two reasons. You are either a manipulative person or you're a naive person. So you're either manipulative or you're naive. For the most part, the person who is weaponizing empathy is manipulative. He knows what he's doing. You, good people, great nation. You that they are weaponizing, whose empathy is being weaponized, you are very naive. I'm talking about us, Yoruba people. For the most part, we are naive because we're at home, everything is fine, everybody's good, we are good, everybody must be good. Before you know it, but because what they say, what they say from you, the Dow. Kí mo lè ṣe láti fi ràn lọ́wọ́ náà? Nígbà tí wọ́n bá kó àwọn ọmọ ẹ̀ kúrò nílé, kó wá sílẹ̀kùn lẹ́pẹ̀ káràtà, kó wá sùn lẹ́jọ́ pé wọ́n lé yẹn kúrò nílé ẹ̀. Ṣé bá tiẹ̀ fún ní BQ? Àbí wà fún ní yàrá àlejò? Wọ́n ní rárá o. Kọ́ tí wọ́n fẹ́ ṣe ni pé wà kó àwọn ẹbí tiẹ̀ jáde torí pé bára ṣe fẹ́ rí pé àwọn ọ̀rẹ́ ẹ̀ wà ń gbòòrò, wọ́n wà ní títì. O sì rí pé wàhálà nìyẹn. So the point is not to just open up. The point is you can accommodate, but there are limits to these things. Let's get back to this. So he says here, I thought that it was in the best interest of Nigeria that the Yorubas should not be reduced to a state of impotence into which they were fast degenerating. They had something which was all their own to contribute to the common pool of Nigerian nationalism and nationhood. I decided therefore to do all in my power to infuse solidarity into the disjointed tribes that constitute the Yoruba ethnic group, to raise their morale, to rehabilitate their self-respect, and to imbue them with the confidence that they are an important factor in the forging of the federal unity of Nigeria. Also in 1943, Dr. Azikiwe wrote a series of articles in the Pilot entitled Political Blueprint of Nigeria. In the series, he advocated, without saying so in so many words, a quasi-federal constitution for Nigeria and the division of Nigeria into 8 protectorates. Please stay with me. The articles were later published in pamphlet form with the same title. The following paragraph from the pamphlet at page 11 is relevant and of interest. So this is from Azikiwe's own book, Political Blueprint of Nigeria. He says, the exercise of executive power, I'll take that again. The exercise of executive power is concerned with the administration of the laws of the state for the maintenance of order and good government. To exercise it in accordance with the idea of democracy, which animates our constitutional advance, Nigeria and the Cameroons should comprise 8 protectorates. We hear Cameroons now because Southern Cameroon was part of Nigeria up until this moment. As a matter of fact, was part of Nigeria up until 1961. But they broke off politically in 1953. But eventually left in 61. So when he said Nigerian Cameroons, that's what he was saying. By the way, those people used to be part of the Eastern region before they showed them Pepe. All right, so he said he wanted Nigeria to have 8 protectorates. So this is what he said. Northern Protectorate, that's Katsina, Kano, Zaria provinces. Northwestern, Sokoto, Niger, Ilorin. Northeastern, Borno, Bauchi, Adamawa. Central, Kaba, Benue, Plateau provinces. Southern, that's Warri, Benin, Onitsha, Owerri provinces. Southwestern, Ondo, Ijebu, Abeokuta, Oyo, Lagos provinces. By the way, this is the best thing he gave, which is actually warped, but it's worse than what he gave in 1957. When we get to that part, we'll talk about it as well. Southeastern, Calabar, Ogoja provinces. Cameroon, Southern, Northern provinces. This protectorate shall form a Commonwealth of Nigeria. At the head of the Commonwealth shall be a Governor General and a Lieutenant Governor General. At the end of each protectorate shall be a Governor and a Lieutenant Governor. By the way, the word protectorate, you can also, what's the word now? Substitute it for state. So essentially saying 7 states. Excuse me. So it's essentially saying 7 states. But what did I think of this particular arrangement? 2 things struck me as significant in Dr. Azikiwe's formula. First, all the Igbos in Benin and Warri provinces of the Western Protectorate or region were to be merged with their kith and kin in Onitsha and Owerri under Azikiwe's proposed Southern Protectorate. Again, when you hear Onitsha, Owerri, Benin, Warri, they're not talking about the towns. They're talking about the provinces. So the provinces were named after those towns. So Owerri province is not just Owerri. You have other towns around that place that are part of Owerri. Just like I used to say that this whole thing about, it's not today's topic, but this whole thing about women's riots. The about women riots did not happen in Igbo land and was not spearheaded by Igbo women. It happened in the state where I served, but who for some reason have been shut down, but they will be heard. It happened in Ẹkáàbọ state. It happened in a place called Ikorabasi. And the women that fought the so-called about women riots were Ibibio women, not Igbo women. As a matter of fact, there were Igbo women amongst them, but the main people that fought, there were even Yoruba women amongst them. But the main people that actually fought that stuff were Ibibio women. But when you say Aba, it was because they were under that province. We'll talk about that some other time. Where were we? All right. So Baba is saying here that in his own structure, all the Igbos in Benin province, in Warri province, that will be in present-day Delta, all of them will be put together with their folks, with their kith and kin in Onitsha and Owerri. So that will be the present-day southeastern states. The present-day southeast states will be apart from parts of Abakaliki, which was part of Ogoja. I'll explain later. Much of what we now call southeast was under Onitsha and Owerri provinces. So he's saying here that what struck me as significant, two things struck me as significant in Dr. Azikwe's formula. First, all the Igbos in Benin and Warri provinces of the Western Protectorate or region were to be merged with their kith and kin in Onitsha and Owerri under Azikiwe's proposed Southern Protectorate. Though similar considerations was not extended to the Yorubas of Ilorin and Kaba. For instance, he put Ilorin with Sokoto and Niger. He put Kaba with Benue and Plateau, but he made sure that he put Igbos in one place. The other place where he cut the Igbos into were the places where the Igbos were the majority, even though it was not the ancestral space. Let me read that for you. Secondly, the Igbos were cleverly split into two protectorates, southern and southeastern, where because of their numbers, they would be in permanent dominance, having regards to their unique ethnic loyalty and solidarity, which had been demonstrated during the Ikoli-Akisanya crisis, and which has been demonstrated several times since. I thought the formula was unscientific and partisan, not in accordance with precedent, and not capable of ensuring harmony among the diverse ethnic groups in Nigeria. On leaving the shores of Nigeria, you know what? Let's move on very fast. Somebody on YouTube. Amen. 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 Miku, thank you very much for that. Wow. That means a lot. I'm trying to take it in. Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you, Ibo Jinoju. Kolon Shanoa. Kolon Alowo. Wow. What my local wrote here is actually very, very... Thank you. All right. On leaving the shores of Nigeria in August 1944, I should read it. No, I can't. It's too. It's a word of appreciation and prayer, but that prayer is heavy. So essentially, he was praying for me, my generation. Yeah. Yeah, I think you Twitter audio. Don't worry, I'm going to make it better tomorrow. This Twitter thing. You know how some people will say certain things. You just be saying amen. Amen. No. It's just like God will help us and raise people to work with us and. Many people to support what we're doing so that we can reach the unborn Yoruba generations. This is something. Thank you, sir. All right, let's get back into this. On leaving the shores of Nigeria in August 1944, I resolved that I would have nothing to do with politics until I had finished my studies and made some money. I also resolved that before I again entered into politics, I would see to it that the Yorubas evolved an ethnic solidarity among themselves, just as the Ibibios and the Igbos had done, in order to ensure a strong and harmonious federal union among the peoples of Nigeria. In less than a year after I reached the United Kingdom, I set to work to translate my ideas into reality. Tomorrow we're starting from this particular place. Recap it in Koju. Sorry, I want to mark it so I don't forget. So he says, in less than a year after I reached the United Kingdom, I set to work to translate my ideas into realities. A group of Yorubas, mostly students, Dr. Oni Akerele, Chief Abiodun Akerele, barrister at law and member of the House of Representatives. Again, when you start hearing things like barrister at law, member of House of Rep, accountant, that's what they became when the book was written in 1960. Okay, but this thing was happening in 1945. A group of Yorubas, mostly students, Dr. Oni Akerele, Chief Abiodun Akerele, barrister at law and member of the House of Representatives, Mr. Akintola Williams, chartered accountant, Chief Ayosundero CG, Federal Secretary of the Action Group, a member of the House of Representatives, and others, and I founded a Yoruba organization in London named the Egbe Omo Oduduwa, meaning a society of the descendants of Oduduwa. I think it's better now, Mayowa. People are there now. But if there's anything, I will listen to it myself once people come back up. Then just continue. So they said they founded a Yoruba organization in London named the Ẹgbẹ́ Ọmọ Odùduwà. But thank you for the feedback. Meaning a society of the descendants of Odùduwà. Now it gets interesting. In view of the hostility and controversy which had marked the birth of the Ẹgbẹ́ Ọmọ Odùduwà and of the general misunderstanding which has existed ever since about the real intentions of this organization, I reproduce here in full the aims of the Ẹgbẹ́ and its methods of approach as set out in its first constitution, which was drafted by me with the collaboration of one of its founders. The aims of the association are divided into two categories. Number one, Yoruba land. Now, remember when I was reading the reason for the creation of the Igbo State Union? You will not see anything. Again, this one I will compare. I'm sure you know I usually say there's no reason for comparison, and I don't do it. But for this one, I will do it. And the reason is because I want to make a point. Those who say to you that you are tribalistic, they have their own vision, their own goal. We're going to go deep into this tomorrow, I promise you. You who are being called tribalistic, you have your own goals. You are Yoruba, you believe that you are tribalistic because they said so. But have you ever checked your goals? And have you ever checked their goals? And if you have ever done that, what was your inference? What was your conclusion after checking those two? What did you come to understand? In case you have not checked those two, we'll check one today, we'll check this one again tomorrow, and the other one. But let's go into Yoruba because I want to spend some time to even help us understand what our fathers did and how we should walk in their shoes. All right, or in their steps, I mean. The aims of the association of the Ẹgbẹ́ Ọmọ Odùduwà are divided into two categories. Number A, Yoruba land. Number one. So A is Yoruba land, B is Nigeria. In other words, the Yoruba people starting an organization in London for Yoruba people, had plans for Yoruba people and for Nigeria. How cool was that? Or is that? They want to have an organization for Yoruba people, but they had plans for Yoruba land and for Nigeria because they are Nigerians. Again, the aims of the association are divided into two categories. A, Yoruba land. Number one, to study fully its political problems, combat the disintegrating forces of tribalism. That's tribalism amongst us. You know, Yoruba cannot be tribal against Igbo because Yoruba is not a tribe. Don't leave me, don't leave me, don't leave me, don't leave me, don't leave me. But you get the point. What, again, we'll stop sometime there. This idea of tribalism is Ijebu is a tribe. Egba is a tribe. But Yoruba is a nation. So if you do something on that level as a Yoruba person, it will be nationalism. For instance, when the Scottish do the things they do, we don't say that they are tribalists. We call them Scottish nationalists. If you can say Scottish nationalists, why are you saying Yoruba tribalists? So the tribalism they're talking about here is not Yoruba versus Igbo, Yoruba versus Hausa, is within ourselves because we get issues that time. And may we not have that kind of issue again, like by our law. So number one, to study fully its political problems, combat the disintegrating forces of tribalism, stamp out discrimination within the group and against minorities, and generally infuse the idea of a single nationality throughout the region. Number two, to study its economic resources, ascertain its potentialities, and advise as to the wisest utilization of its wealth so as to ensure abundance and prosperity for its people. Number three, to plan for the improvement of educational facilities both in content and extent, to explore the means of introducing mass education promptly and efficiently, and to foster the study of Yoruba language, culture, and history. Number four, to promote the social welfare of Yoruba land, combat the cankerworm of superstition and ignorance, spread the knowledge of medical relief, and stimulate the provision of hospitals, maternity homes, and such like amenities. Now B, Nigeria. Number 1, to cooperate in the fullest measure with other regions to see that the aims set out in A are applied to the whole country. Number 2, to aid and encourage similar groups in the other regions in every way possible to achieve these ideals. Let me ask you again. Are you, as a Yoruba person, proud of this thing? Let me answer it for you. Yes. I've said it several times. When you go back to the 1930s and 40s and you see the mindset of the leaders from different ethnic groups, you understand why we are where we are today. The Northerner wants to do what he wants to do. If you do well, it's okay. If you don't do well, say go be. The Westerner wants to do well and wants you to do well. I mean, this was in 1945. He's saying we want to cooperate with other groups so that what we want to achieve in our own space, you should also achieve it in your own space. Then number 2, we want to aid and encourage similar groups to accomplish the same ideals. But folks from the East, again, if you think I'm lying, wait until tomorrow. I'm not going to read it now because I want to move into some pages before I leave here today. Wait until tomorrow. The plan some other groups have is to win at the expense of others, which is why people still think like that in that area of town, in that side of town, till today. One wants to win, doesn't care if you win or lose. The other one wants to win and wants you to win. Then the third one wants to win at the expense of every other person. Fill in the gaps. Let's get into this. Methods of approach. How do we accomplish these things? Number 1. Sorry. How do we accomplish this? So it's methods of approach. A, by studying. Let me calm down. Guys, let me calm down so I can read. I read very fast, and I wonder sometimes I'm able to read like this out. I'm even slowing down here. How do we accomplish this thing? So he calls it methods of approach. A, by studying problems affecting Yoruba land in particular and Nigeria in general through 1, research, 2, lectures, 3, paper reading, 4, discussion. B, by disseminating the knowledge thus gained and conclusions reached among the people in Yoruba land and Nigeria by the following means. Number 1, the propagation of the idea of a modern Yoruba state and a federal state of Nigeria through the agency of reliable persons who share our ideals. Number 2, the issuing of magazines, booklets, and other publications in English and Yoruba. So it's like saying issuing of magazines, booklets, TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, like what you are doing right now, in English and Yoruba. Number 3, the encouragement of the immediate setting up of Ẹgbẹ́ Ọmọ Odùduwà in Yoruba land, provided the promoters give an undertaking that the first 3 years will be devoted to strengthening the organization financially and studying local problems while refraining from any direct political action. In other words, if you start anything, no politics for 3 years. Just focus on our people. Before the Ẹgbẹ́ was founded in Before the Ẹgbẹ́ was founded in London in 1945, there was already a 2-year-old branch of the Igbo Federal Union. Now, let us adjust our seats. Let me first ask a question, just to make sure that we're all listening. When was the Igbo Union started? When was it founded, I mean? If you're Yoruba, please be proud. That spirit of let's bless everybody that you are doing right now is because of what they did do. When was Igbo Union started? 1920? No. 38? No. You know we're in class, Abi? Our sessions are divided into 2. News and class. So, class bits, I'm asking, so I want to be sure you were listening. When was the Igbo Perism, Bishop? Let me clap for you. I'm clapping for the other ones too, Sha, but please be reminded of the dates. It's important. It's important. The dates are important. No, it's 36. The dates are important. You're going to see why. Etifi Jeba, Ekare. Gorilla said 1999. Well done. MIT Jeba, 1936. He's taking part that counts. Yes, I'm glad you are here. I mean, I'm glad you even took part. There's a reason I'm even asking, because I want to make a point very soon. But you will get, when I make the point, you will understand it. Igbo State Union started in 1936. By 1943, they already had a branch in London. So by the time they were starting Yoruba Ẹgbẹ́ Modudua in 1945, the Igbo Union in London was already 2 years old. That's the one in London, or not the general one. General one at that time was already 9 years old. But the one in London was already 2 years old. Why is this important? Stay with me. It says before the Egbe was founded in London in 1945, there was already a 2-year-old branch of the Igbo Federal Union there. Even so, the reaction of practically all the students from the eastern region and some from the western region, Yoruba bots, 1945. What did they do? It says the reaction of practically all the students from the eastern region and of some from the western region to the formation of the Egbe was a hostile one. Being the most prominent among the founders, I was singled out for attack. I was accused of being tribalistic and of having a design to wreck the unity of Nigeria. You have a Yoruba, you have your Igbo Union in 1943. How can having Yoruba group be the thing that will lead to the wreckage of dissolution of Nigeria? In other words, you have had it since 36, you're not tribalistic. I am having it in 45, I'm certainly tribalistic. Guys, if we don't get it today, tomorrow I'm going to get into the part what Zik himself said in his newspaper. This gaslighting technique is not today, no burial. You are tribalistic for voting Tinubu. How dare you? He is not tribalistic for giving almost 90% of the entire region to Peter Obi. He's not tribalistic. He's doing it because he wants good governance. But you are tribalistic. Even though you have 6 states, and in your 6 states, one state was won by a northerner, another state was won by an easterner, and then your own person won 4 of those states. But you are tribalistic. He is not tribalistic, but in his own states, you have 90-something%. The average is about 90% of all the states in the southeast, but he's not tribalistic. You are the tribalist. He founded Igbo State Union in 1936, but he's not a tribalist. You are starting Ẹgbẹ́ Modudua in 1945, but you are a tribalist. And just like today, some Yoruba people were also part of this nonsense. Why must we have our own union? Why did they have their own? Let's continue. By the way, it gets worse. But it's going to get better eventually. So he says, the reaction of practically all the students from the eastern region and of some from the western region to the formation of the Egbe was a hostile one. Being the most prominent among the founders, I was singled out for attack. I was accused of being tribalistic and of having a design to wreck the unity of Nigeria. In the face of the aims and objects of the Egbe, which were widely circulated among Nigerian students in the United Kingdom, these accusations... In the face of the aims and objects of course, the Old English for objectives. In the face of the aims and objects of the Egbe, which were widely circulated among Nigerian students in the United Kingdom, these accusations did not make any sense to me. All the same, I seized every opportunity that offered itself to explain these aims and objects to my detractors. The executive committee of the Egbe also decided to hold a joint meeting. Decided to hold a joint meeting with the executive committee of the London branch of the Igbo Federal Union. with a view to making to the latter a full explanation of what the Egbe stood for, and to driving the point home that the Egbe was purely and simply the Yoruba counterpart of the Igbo Federal Union. Let me pause to say this. This is not going to happen again ever in Yoruba land or on Yoruba matters, where Yoruba people will feel the need to explain themselves to another group because those groups feel threatened. What am I saying? Essentially, then Papa, the executive committee, they decided, listen, these guys don't understand what we're trying to do. If you're on TikTok, please like the on YouTube, please like the live stream. Thank you. Thank you. They said, oh, these people are calling us tribalists. So what we should do is this. Let's have a meeting with them. Let's explain to them. I mean, first of all, they printed the objectives that we read earlier. Excuse me. They printed the objectives and distributed it amongst the people. In other words, whether you were Yoruba or Igbo, wherever you came from, they gave everybody so that people understand what was happening. But when they started calling them tribalists, they said, okay, you know what, let's even have a meeting. Let the executive council of this Egbe explain to the Igbo State Union that what we are doing is not tribalism, it's just, we're just the Yoruba counterpart of your own Igbo Federal Union. So what happened? Let's go on. I made contact with the chairman of the Igbo Federal Union, Mr. Chuba Ikpazu, a law student, through my friend, Mr. G. Onyuke, another law student. And a date for a meeting between the committees was fixed. Somehow, about 24 hours before the time of the meeting, Mr. Ikpazu sent a message to say that he and his officers had another important engagement, which made it impossible for them to attend the proposed meeting. He promised to let us have another date. He was unable to fulfill this promise before we all returned home to Nigeria. That's a very mild way of saying they didn't have the meeting ever. 24 hours to the meeting, you then say, oh, we are busy. Please don't let anybody put you in this particular position where you have to explain yourself. For instance, you have to explain why the street names were changed in Lagos. You have to explain how you're not a tribalist for supporting Tinubu. Listen, last election, I wasn't very vocal about who I was supporting because I wasn't sure what everybody was doing until very close to the election. I was like, okay, I'm going to vote for Tinubu. This one is Tinubu. And the reason I voted for him then is the same reason I voted. In fact, there's even better reasons. But the reason then was that of all of them was one that had a plan, a strategy. And right now, I see him implementing those things. If in your own dreams you now say it's because it's Yoruba, then so be it. I don't have to explain myself. I don't have to say, let me prove to you, it's not really because it's Yoruba, you know, there's certain things he did. Let me tell you about the nail fund. Let me tell you about, you know, subsidy removal. I don't have to tell you anything. You come to me, you tell me that it's because I'm a tribalist. Yes, you are right. Because it be like, say, this thing got said, on how it was see. So you explain waba. I just remember the scene, you know, in Shaoro there, when some of the chiefs went to meet I want to get do how don't you say oh get do. Those are pé tibiawa tonwa olongbo ase kongu no ma wa one way feel like gogoro agbada gereje. The point basically is that different people will just come and be asking you questions, you are answering them. Okay. No, I'm a tribalist. Okay, I hear you. I understand. I agree. What then? When the Egbe was founded in London, copies of its constitution were sent to Obas, chiefs, and outstanding Yorubas, with an accompanying letter in which an appeal was made to them to found a similar organization at home. Apart from His Highness Sir Adesoji Aderemi, the Ooni of Ife, and President of the Western House of Chiefs, and 3 other persons, there was no response from the scores of people to whom we had written. and nothing at all was done at home to start the Egbe or something similar to it. On my return home, I began in earnest to preach the formation of the Egbe. People listened to me, either with concealed indifference or undisguised boredom. Then one day in 1948, I read in the papers that the Egbe Modudua had been formed in Lagos by a group of outstanding Yoruba leaders. Sir Adeyemo Alakija, Dr. Akinola Maja, Sir Kofu Abayomi, Chief Bode Thomas, Chief H.O. Davis, Dr. Akoni Doherty, and others too numerous to mention were among the foundation members. I was jubilant to read this report, and I quickly sent a telegram immediately. So he says here, I was jubilant to read this report, and I quickly sent a telegram of felicitations to the Lagos founders of the Egbe. I also took immediate steps to inaugurate a branch in Ibadan. The aims and objects of the newly formed Egbe were identical with those of the one founded in London, with but some slight modifications. The new organization pledged itself, A, to encourage, especially by means of scholarship awards, to encourage, especially by means of scholarship awards by the society, the pursuit of secondary and university education among Yoruba boys and girls. That's the first goal of the Egbe Modudua. B, to recognize and maintain the monarchical and other similar institutions of Yoruba land. To plan for their complete enlightenment and democratization. And C, to strive earnestly to cooperate with other ethnical associations in matters of common interest. That's the word I've always been preaching. Our father said it. Common interest. We unite based on interest, not based on identity. It says here, to strive earnestly to cooperate with other ethnical associations, that ethnic groups, in matters of common interest to all Nigerians, so as thereby to attain to unity in federation. Not unity of identity. I will always be Yoruba, and I'm also Nigerian. But I'm not going to stop being Yoruba because it makes you feel uncomfortable, or because you don't like the language, or don't like the culture. That's your problem. The reaction of Dr. Azikiwe, this is where we're going to stop, but 8 o'clock, what a wonderful word. The reaction of Dr. Azikiwe and all his supporters to the newly formed Egbe was violent beyond compare. Again, 1945, they had pushbacks. There were many groups in London studying, but it was the Igbo Union that had problem with Egbe Modudua, even though they were inside the Igbo Union. 3 years later, 1948, they now launched the same thing in Lagos. Lagos is not even London. Lagos is Yoruba land. But that doesn't matter, or it didn't matter to Azikiwe and Igbo State Union. They still attacked Egbe Modudua. I'm going to read the details in a bit. Give me a second. The reaction of Dr. Azikiwe and all his supporters to the newly formed Egbe was violent beyond compare. All the leaders of the Egbe were vilified in Dr. Azikiwe's newspapers. You know the crazy part? Azikiwe was not only a member of the Igbo State Union, he was the president. Somebody said, I get that. Common interest. I've been saying this. You got it, and thank God you got it. This is why I repeat things, though. I'm glad you got it. I say it every time. Interest, not identity. Interest, not identity. We unite based on interest, not because we want to have a new Nigeria where I forget who I am. But I'm glad you got it. So it says, the reaction of Dr. Azikiwe and all his supporters to the newly formed Egbe was violent beyond compare. All the leaders of the Egbe were vilified in Dr. Azikiwe's newspapers. The high watermark of the campaign was reached in the following extract from an editorial article in the Pilot of September 8, 1948. This is what Zik published. But now that the Egbe has made it clear that this is from his paper, this is newspaper, I'm reading newspaper extract now. But now that the Egbe has made it clear that its battle is not really against Dr. Azikiwe personally, and even against Igbos as a group, but against the aspirations of the 27 million Nigerians backing up the NCNC, the time has come for real action. Henceforth, the cry must be one of battle against the Egbe Omodudua, its leaders at home and abroad, uphill and down dale, in the streets of Nigeria and in the residence of its advocates. The Egbe Omodudua is the enemy of Nigeria. It must be crushed to the earth. There is no going back until the fascist organization of Sir Adeyemo Alakija has been dismembered. That's the Pan-African, that's nationalist. That's what you thought of Yoruba people having Yoruba group in Yoruba land. You know, the London incident was stupid, but let's even assume that maybe they did it because, no man's land. It's not your land, it's not my land, so neither of us own the land now in Bogota. But in Nigeria, in my very before, in Yoruba land, you are calling the organization a fascist organization. Number one, you even got to the point where you overestimated yourself to think that the Egbe Omodudua was founded to attack Zik or to attack Igbos. Why? Even when the objectives are clearly stated, I read it earlier, there are 3 objectives when they started in Lagos. Number one was to have scholarships, for young people, young boys and girls to go to secondary school. Number 2 was to democratize the monarchical institution and to sustain it, right, to make sure that, it's reformed. Number 3 was to cooperate with other ethnical associations to do things of common interest that will lead to the unity of the federation. Those 3 goals, if you're a human being, and not to say, what if you're calling young Baparo? If you're a human being, why would you have a problem with that? But then they said, henceforth, the cry must be one of battle. By the way, let me quickly tell you what, before I read that part. He said, number one, you're not against Azikiwe. You're not against Igbo. So you are against 27 million Nigerians backing NCNC. What did you see there? You just made your personal insecurity the business of the entire nation, or at least the part that support the party that you are leading. NCNC has supporters. Some of the members of NCNC were in this Egbe Omodudua, and yet you are saying that Egbe Omodudua is against NCNC and its 27 million supporters. What is it doing? Propaganda. Let me tell you something. One of the strengths of Azikiwe, which is also the disadvantage that these people are facing right now, was propaganda. One of his major strengths was propagandizing. He knew how to do it. But one of the things that is killing the people right now is propaganda. Because when you are done lying on people, eventually, now you go collect last. You go lie on top of your own friends. You can't talk, say, now 27 million Nigerians supporting NCNC, they are the ones that Yoruba people are against, even though Yoruba people are in NCNC, even though NCNC was founded by Yoruba people. Even though the organization that founded NCNC, none of them was a major Igbo organization. There were 3 to 4 organizations that came together to found NCNC. There was NNDP, which was Herbert Makaulay's party. Original, it was started in 1923. There was the TUC, the Trade Union Congress, where you have all the workers represented. There was the Lagos Market Women Association that was led by Alimoto Pelewura. And there was the Nigerian Student Movement that started from Abeokuta. Which of these groups, Lode predominantly Igbo group? It just so happened that Herbert Macaulay had a secretary who was Azikiwe. Majority of those who formed the core of NCNC were Yoruba people. and yet the Yoruba people decide to establish an association for themselves and call it Ẹgbẹ́ Ọmọ Odùduwà. Maybe, and I've thought about this for a long time, but this is the first time I'm going to say it. I've never said it out loud, but I'm going to say it now. Maybe the problem was that they called it Ẹgbẹ́ Ọmọ Odùduwà. They use Yoruba name throughout. Maybe they felt it was too cultural because, these days, if you speak Yoruba, you're also tribalistic, aren't you? Somebody says Zik of Africa. Zik, by the time Zik died, it was not, even he knew it wasn't Zik of, by the 1960s, it stopped being Zik of Africa. By late 60s, early 70s, they stripped him of that thing now. He didn't know. It was after he died that these people are shouting Zik of Africa. Many of them did not even know what happened around that time. As our 70s, I have books from the 70s, from the 80s. It was cut to size first by his own people self when he saw Believing in Biafra in 1969. Zik of Africa, Bao. Let me tell you how Kole Motosho described it. Very funny. So he went from being Zik of Africa to Zik of Nigeria to Zik of Onitsha to just Zik. In fact, Zik of Eastern region was Zik of Onitsha, Zik of Nigeria, Zik of Africa, Zik of Nigeria, Zik of Eastern region, Zik of Onitsha, and then ordinary Zik. And he published that book in the 19th. I think whenever you hear about this, branding. When I was growing up, whenever I read, this is the truth, whenever I read newspapers, and my dad bought newspapers every blessed day. Whenever I read of Zik in Nigerian newspapers, any paper, the title they gave was Owele of Onitsha. Owele of Onitsha. Somebody says on YouTube, it all makes sense now. You would really feel it when you're in your homeland, but when you leave the shores of Nigeria, you see it play out. So he says, henceforth, the cry must be one of battle against the Ẹgbẹ́ Ọmọ Odùduwà, its leaders, home and abroad, uphill and downdale, in the streets of Nigeria, and in the residence of its advocates. What's it talking about here? Attack. If you say the cry must be one of battle, and you should go to the uphill, downdale, in the streets, in the homes. What are you saying? Are you coming to pray for me, or are you coming to have fellowship? It's attack. So it says, henceforth, the cry must be one of battle against the Ẹgbẹ́ Ọmọ Odùduwà, its leaders at home and abroad, uphill and downdale, in the streets of Nigeria and in the residence of its advocates. The Ẹgbẹ́ Ọmọ Odùduwà is the enemy of Nigeria. It must be crushed to the earth. There is no going back until the fascist organization of Sir Adeyemo Alakija has been dismembered. Apart from newspaper attacks, there were also physical assaults on the persons of the leaders of the Egbe and damage to the houses and other property of some of them. I say it a lot. This morning, before I came up, I was reading a document that was published by Ẹkáàbọ Rizu. It's called Zikism. And then I was reading it with another document where they were talking about the ideals of Zikism. What a lot of people don't understand is this. There's a parallel. Is the word parallel? There are too many similarities between Zikism and obedient movement. And there's a lot of similarities between the activities and that of the obedient movement. They were violent beyond compare. They were violent to the point where they removed Zik. When Ẹkáàbọ Rizu wrote that book, he was writing it there that it wasn't even Zik that said the movement. He mentioned one name. They say he was one who drafted this stuff about the movement. They were violent. And it's just like obedient movement. These ones, hopefully they don't get into the physical part. I hope they don't. To be honest, they did it during the last elections. They beat people in Eastern region. That is true. They beat people. But this thing where They will attack you, report you to your workplace, go on Netflix, try to bring down Toya Imako's film because you are against my life. You don't have a life that is even worth being against. Because if you have a life that's worth being against, you will sit down and think, because before being stupid, just join them up. And by the way, one of the major points about these guys is that they don't have the capacity to think mob. It's a mob. And if you ever go against what they are saying, you have corn in your pocket. Somebody sent me a message. I don't know. I didn't know what to do with it yesterday. Said I have corn in my pocket. Me, I was like, man, so I was selling Ogio. I was selling corn already. Not that I have corn in my pocket. I was selling it. Or doing cornflakes, making pap. I've been eating the corn. What are you talking about? So you have corn in your pocket. So what? I have the corn in my pocket. I have it in my house. I make breakfast with cornflakes and pap when I like. I eat it as mouth organ. I'm selling it. You can come and buy. It makes no sense. If you just go against what they're saying, you have corn in your pocket. You're against their life. You're part of a structure of criminality, the same structure that the Lord and Savior has now joined. They're just a bunch of clowns. Like, they don't know jack. If a person says something, everybody must say it. If you say no, then you have corn in your pocket. How do you, as a responsible person who claims to have been educated, be in that group? I'm not advocating for you to join any group. I'm just saying, at least join the one that even makes you feel like when you go home and you tell your father, I belong to one, he'll say, my son, I didn't waste my school, I didn't waste school fees. You go to university, no critical thinking. You can't say this is it based on this, this, and this. Somebody asks you one question, you start insulting them, you start cursing their fathers because you have no father to go back to be honest. Maybe that's why. Because if you have a good father at home, at least you'll be asking them questions. Because the kind of insults I get on the daily basis, I'm just wondering who raised these ones. And your insult will not change the fact that most of you don't think. And I've said this several times, I'll say it again. One of the criteria of joining the movement is that you must drop your brain at the door. You can't think for yourself. You know why? That movement requires you to be part of the mob. To have independent thinking means that you can question what they're saying. So you're not allowed to have independent thinking. The point I'm trying to make is this. Whatever they do, and maybe tomorrow I'm going to talk about it a bit deeper, or maybe some other time, but I'll find some time to talk about it. You know what? It's even in this book. You'll see more of it when we get to what happened in 1948. We'll get to it. You will see how they don't calm down now. They should not calm down. Why did they calm down? That's the question. They calmed down because they discovered that they didn't have the monopoly of bullying. I don't even know how to bully people, but I'll just set you straight. Let's go my nephews at the time. What exactly is they can't explain. Groupthink, thank you very much. African development. Groupthink, no independent thought. Bully everybody. Meanwhile, the product they are selling, is it original or fake? The answer is left to you. Let's get back to this. Apart from newspaper attacks, there were also physical assaults on the persons of the leaders of the Egbe and damage to the houses and other property of some of them. It was absolutely impossible on nationalist grounds to reconcile Dr. Azikiwe's insensate hostility to the Egbe with his presidentship of the Igbo Federal Union and his obvious condonation of the existence of a similar organization founded in the northern Nigeria in May 1948 and called Jamia Mutanen Arewa, Northern People's Congress. In other words, the Northerners started Arewa in May of 1948. Azikiwe did not speak against it. It's like what happens today. When people tell you things like they can move anywhere, but they never say it in the North. My question is, are they afraid of Northerners? Or is there someone, did somebody promise them southern Nigeria? Besides, in spite of his protestations to the contrary, Dr. Azikiwe was himself an unabashed Igbo jingoist, and he gave the game completely away when he said inter alia in his presidential address to the Igbo Federal Union in 1949 as follows. Take a listen to this. This will be the last thing I read for today, and then we'll come on, we'll discuss some of these things tomorrow, and then we'll move on to other things. This is what Azikiwe said in 1949. Let me quickly say this. If you go online to look for this speech, what you will find is a doctored, you're going to find a doctored copy. I've seen a doctored copy. I've seen this one that Papa is saying, I've seen it from other sources, older sources, quoting the newspaper verbatim. This is what you're going to find in the West African Pilot of 1949. This is what Zik said. It would appear that the God of Africa has specially created the Igbo nation to lead the children of Africa from the bondage of the ages. The martial prowess of the Igbo nation at all ages of human history has enabled them not only to conquer others, which one? But also to adapt themselves to the role of preserver. The Igbo nation cannot shirk its responsibilities, or its responsibility. Politically, you have seen with your own eyes how you were disenfranchised by the British. The Igbo nation has never been represented in the Executive Council. Economically, the Igbo nation has labored under onerous taxation measures without sufficient social amenities to justify same. We have been taxed without representation, and our contributions in taxes have been used to develop other areas. Nalayo, I'll explain tomorrow. Out of proportion to the incidence of taxation in those areas, it would seem that the Igbo nation is becoming a victim of economic annihilation through a gradual but studied progress. In 1948, another Igbo leader and a member of the Nigeria Legislative Council had declared the domination of Nigeria by the Igbos is a question of time. That's Charles Onyema. It was clear from these statements and from the general political and journalistic maneuvers of Dr. Azikiwe over the years that his great objective was to set himself up as a dictator over Nigeria and to make the Igbo nation the master race. It would appear, according to his reckoning, that the only obstacle in the path of his ambition was the Yoruba intelligentsia, and these must be removed at all cost. We'll continue from here tomorrow. Tomorrow we're going to have a fuller session, so please come early. Here is the point. Are we reading history? Yes and no. It's history, yes, because it happened in the 1940s. But it's not history because it's what we are living in right now. This is our reality today. In other words, what we just read is not confined to the pages of history books. It's the reality of today. The fact that you can be insulted, maligned for doing exactly the same thing that certain people are doing. In fact, sometimes not even the same thing they are doing, because I'll tell you something. Ẹkáàbọ Odùduwà was better than Igbo State Union and Igbo Federal Union. I will say it again and again. If you read the 1949 speech, and tomorrow we'll dissect it, I've done it before, we'll do it again. If you read the 1949 speech, you will see how Zik built his whole argument, his entire argument, on victimhood. Again, I've said it before, I'll say it again. There are two things that Zik put together that if you're a Yoruba person, it will be very difficult. There are some people that do it too. I'm not saying Yoruba people don't do it too. But in our political history, there's no example of that, to be honest. If it exists, I'll tell you. We are not perfect, I'll tell you. But it doesn't exist. What Zik did was to marry two disparate thoughts. I know I've said it before, but like you noticed, somebody said they got something just now. I've been saying this since, so they just got it. So I'll say it again. Hopefully, another person will get it. Two disparate thoughts. One is superiority, the other one is victimhood. On a normal day, these are two parallel lines that should never cross. But Zik did something no other person ever thought of doing. He married those things together and gave it to his people. Number one, the idea that they were the superior race, they were better than everybody else. Number two was that they're the victim of everybody. And because they are superior and they are victim, the problem now is that, okay, so what do you say? So I'm better than you. How do you answer to a person who tells you he's better than you, but you are victimizing him? Let me tell you something. If you're really thinking about it, if you go by his logic, you'll not be able to argue with him. And that's the point. Somebody sent me a message. No, it was even here, I think. And he said that what you're saying is going against what we have always believed. And then somebody, no, I remember the message now. That was one. The one I really want to talk about is when this person said, they say these things to themselves to encourage themselves because of what they have gone through. You will lie to yourself. Do you not know that this narrative is actually what perpetuates that experience? You are boosting your morale to get more doses of the same thing you are complaining about. Not because people want to treat you that way, but because the way you move will force people to treat you that way. If I say, you hate me, you hate me, you hate me, one day you will do something to confirm or to affirm what I already believe. Meanwhile, you may not even be thinking of that. But that's how they've been working since the 1930s, but became institutionalized in 1944. It was expressed verbally in 1945. It was set in a congregation of people in 1949. That's Nigeria's history. It's not 2023. It's not this election. So as long as you're just shouting, it's Tinubu's fault. Tinubu caused this. This last election, he made everybody... No. You will never solve it. You have to go back. And you know, one of the beautiful things I like about this book was when it was published. This is why I like dates. I like that this book was published in 1960. Again, that year, in January, Zik was Senate President. In October, he became Governor General. And Zik did not die until 1996. So he had 36 years to respond to this. And he published a book 10 years after this book was published. And he did not refute these claims. I have that book as well. It's called My Odyssey. His own autobiography was published in 1970. If we have to, we'll read it. It's here. Nobody can gaslight anybody again in Nigeria. Let everybody live in peace, enjoy, harmony. You know, I want you to prosper, thrive, succeed. But don't even ever think of coming with this manipulative nonsense. Of you are better, but you are the victim. Of Yoruba people are tribalistic. Meanwhile, you are doing the exact same thing. Even, in fact, I said earlier, Ẹgbẹ́ Mojuda was way better than Igbo State Union. Why? The objectives. Their objectives. The Igbo State Union was a terrible, let me not say it that way. If you look at the objectives that they had, it was bad. It was good for them, it was bad for others. It was good for them, but it was bad for others. And I've said it several times. Anybody who has a mindset of winner takes all is a person you should be very wary of. In other words, once you are done with the business, the person you are doing business with must hate you because you hit you ate the meat, finish the meat until you were tasting bone and the bone marrow. Nothing for your dogs. In other words, take everything. They must lose. Until they lose, I have not won. That's the mindset from the East, and that's the political mindset. That is the only reason. Guys, that is the only reason you can talk about becoming an indigene in another person's space after 10 years. Just to think, forget writing it down. To even think about it, it must be coming from this frame of mind. Because you lose nothing. How many people are trooping to your place? I'm not saying nobody is there or people are there. Even Yoruba people are there. The Yoruba people there. They have been there for a long time. But how many people are trooping to your place? You are the one trooping, so it pays you more than, you are the one benefiting from this. Why would you have this kind of thoughts? Why not like, I want to win, live and let live. Let's all win together. rise and lift others, but no. Anyway, we're going to continue from here tomorrow. We're going to go a bit deeper. 1 p.m. Ife time, West African time will be here tomorrow. Yes. All right, the papers are written in 45, Macpherson Constitution, some of those things. We'll go a bit technical. Then we'll now go into state creation. If we get into that tomorrow, that'll be fine. If not, maybe on Friday. And when we get to state creation, I'm going to also bring out the book, Willings Commission Report of 1958, to help us understand what happened in that arena. Again, this history that we are doing is not to demonize any group or to say some people are bad. It's just to say this is what happened, and to make it worse, it is what is happening, which means that there is this pattern that we have noticed, and it's because there's a strategy that works, a tactic that works, and that tactic has been used again and again and again. And we have to know exactly how to deal with it, which is what we are doing. Thank you very much for listening. I don't know if anybody wants to speak. This is too late for me. This is too late. And now I'm even thinking whether I should come tomorrow, whether we just do our Kini tomorrow. This is too late. But, wow. I was trying to make up for all the news, so that's why I said tomorrow. Now, I don't even make up now because it's already 8:29. I mean, regardless, we're going to be at 1 p.m. anyway. We'll be at 1 p.m. regardless. Whether I'll come on camera, I think I should be able to do it. By the way, we have some backlogs of videos, which is also one of the reasons we're doing 3 live. But yeah, 1 p.m. tomorrow, if a time West African time, will be here. If you'd like to ask a question, thank you, sirs. Thank you, Mas. Thank you very much. If you have a question or you want to comment, people are writing things on YouTube, actually. Thank you, Mr. Yomiko. Thank you, Kubu. Thank you, Dexter. Somebody says, why didn't Benin colonize them since it had the power to do so? But if Benin had colonized them, maybe their political outlook would have matured more. Oh, I didn't put out my account details. If you'd like to support what we're doing, by the way, let me first thank everybody who has been gifting me. I noticed a lot of gifts, but you know that usually I don't break to acknowledge everything because of the flow of thoughts. But thank you. Excuse me. Thank you. Thank you for the gift. Thank you for your generosity. God bless you. I really appreciate it. If you'd like to support us, please reach out. I'll give you the bank details. There's a lot of work to be done. We're also trying to do more work in terms of pushing the videos, so please support any way you can, and then we can sensitize our people together. Now, I know that I don't think anybody has any questions, because again, we spent 8:31. This is unbelievable, but I'm not complaining. All right, so what we're going to do, excuse me, what we're going to do, we're going to listen to our anthems. But let me also thank our people, because everyone in the comment section, thank you. Thank you, Empress. Thank you for liking the live. Thank you for sharing the live. Thank you for typing and tapping and liking. Every single thing you do helps the live session. We're on 318K right now, which is fantastic. Thank you for getting us to 318K likes on TikTok. We have folks on YouTube, and I want to appreciate your presence. Thank you. Thanks to those on Twitter as well. I really appreciate you. We're going to continue this tomorrow at 1 p.m. if you're time West Africa. Before we go, we'll have our anthems. I want to see if we're going to have copyright issues based on this one. There's one I just found, and I think it's going to work. So I'm going to play that, and then I'm going to play the Yoruba anthem, and we'll continue tomorrow at 1 p.m. Ife time, West African time. All right. Thank you very much. Again, yes, Ife time. Ife time is West African time. Yeah. By the way, just in case you're, because I know we are new on Twitter, like full sessions. This is the second full session on Twitter. The reason I say Ife time is because as Yoruba people, we have this saying that Ile Ife ni betojumo ti mowa. So essentially, like that's the place from where the day dawns. But also it's also deeper than that. It also talks about the civilization that we have as a people. So I just felt, why not just continue the tradition by saying Ife time? So that's why I say Ife time. I've been doing this for a while now. So yeah, tomorrow, if at 1 p.m. Ife time, West African time, we'll be here to continue the conversation. Awolowo, Zik and Federalism, Part 3. That will be tomorrow. But before we go, we listen to our anthems. We have our national anthem and also the Yoruba anthem. Please don't rush away. Don't run away. Don't rush. Don't run away. Let's honor the country and our heritage together. Umbo. Great. Àwa ni ìmọ́lẹ̀ ògo adúláwọ̀, ìmọ́lẹ̀ wọ̀ ni wọ́kùn lágbára Ọlọ́run. Ṣé okay ń gbọ́ mi àbí? Ìmọ́lẹ̀ wọ̀ ni wọ́kùn, ayé wa dá o, ilẹ̀ wa dá o, Nàìjíríà dá, ilẹ̀ Yorùbá náà dá, ilẹ̀ Yorùbá ò ní bàjẹ́. Thank you very much for a fantastic session today. We'll have another great one tomorrow by God's grace. Do have a lovely evening. Thank you, 325K on TikTok likes. Thank you. And thank you to those on Twitter. We're just starting out on Twitter, so please support whenever you're here. Kindly share the live and also engage uh, the um, the content we have on TikTok, on YouTube, and on Twitter. YouTube, you have long form content, so certain things that you can't even post on TikTok or YouTube or on Twitter, you find on YouTube. So please visit the channel and take advantage of the content. We have a lot there right now, but we have a lot more to offer. And with your support, we'll do great things. All right. Thank you very much for being here. And I really, really celebrate and appreciate you. Have a lovely evening. I'll see you tomorrow. Odaro. Hmm? All right. Thank you. So today we played all the anthems so that I'm our copyright now. I told to see play. All right. But thank you very much. So Twitter, YouTube, have a great evening.